right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for Monday, January 27th, 2020. Could we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Phyllis, can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Clint Folsom.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mark Lasis.
Here.
Trustee Sandy Hammerly.
Here.
Ken Lish.
Here.
Kevin Ryan.
Here.
Neil Shaw.
Here.
Laura Skwazinski.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here.
Town Attorney Dan Harvey.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harden here.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there items on the agenda board members would like to pull? Okay.
I'd like to pull the 4C. Pull 4C for a future meeting so that the board chair, committee chair, have the work rights to the board.
Okay. Other items?
I'd like to pull 4I, the 88th Street Improvement Project. Oh, sorry. I'd like to pull 4I, the 88th Street Improvement Project.
Okay. Any other changes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis, second by Trustee Lish. All those in favor? Passes unanimous. All right, next is public comment, and this is public comment on consent agenda, presentations, or non-agenda items. If anyone in the public would like to comment at this time, we'd welcome you to come up and introduce yourself and give you 5 minutes for comments. Mr. Walker. Good.
It's good to see you folks again. Good evening, board. It's good to see you folks. Good evening, board. My name is Brad Walker. I live in Superior. I hope everyone's having a great new year. I want to take this moment to provide some comments about the airport consultant discussion from the October 14th board meeting. I've looked over this video numerous times and I'm not happy about this. I've read the Joe Neguse letter and it makes good political theater. I'm also in agreement with Trustee Lasis that getting the attention of our representative is a good thing, and that's one reason I'm a member of AOPA. Last year, AOPA spent $14 million on advocacy and outreach. Think about that for a moment. AOPA spent almost 25% of the town budget advocating for general aviation. In addition, AOPA PAC is considered one of the top lobbyist organizations in Washington, D.C. This is because they reach across both parties to help candidates who share the desire to help general aviation. The letter from Joe Neguse has drawn their attention. I would like to point out the legislation proposed is terrible legislation. The aviation infrastructure in this country is the largest in the world. This policy would create a huge inefficiency whereby different local government entities would be able to create conflicting regulations that would affect the national airspace system. In addition, it would rewrite federal law whereby every tax dollar is treated equally and not used for discrimination. But rest assured, AOPA has a long history of dealing with bad legislation being proposed and making sure it dies a prompt death in committee. The letter from Joe Neguse has helped to draw attention to this matter from national aviation groups, and that's a wonderful thing. Which brings me to what I really want to talk about, the local town board response to the planes at RMMA. Trustee Lasis and Ryan, you both mentioned a comment about the 80-20 rule. As you stated, 80% of the noise is coming from 20% of the planes. Mr. Lasis, many people may fly a jalopy Cessna, as you mentioned, but those aircraft are completely legal, airworthy, and have an annual inspection as required by law. I can only imagine what pejorative you would call the 1956 Cessna 172 that I fly my family and myself in. Don't worry, I'll help you out on this. I like to refer to her as my dune buggy of the sky. If you want to provide a $150,000 grant from the town of Superior towards the purchase of a new airplane, I'm confident myself and others would take you up on the offer. But if I did purchase a new airplane, it wouldn't be any less noisy than my dune buggy, as the FAA is the biggest obstacle in implementing new technology. But let's get to the meat of the argument. Mr. Ryan, Mr. Lasis, your focus on who the, quote, problem child is, so that a discussion with these folks can take place, shows a very gross misunderstanding of aviation. These planes are acting in a lawful manner. In addition, the FAA has not approved any new equipment that could be, quote, retrofitted, as you mentioned. Also, a continued focus on a select few owners of planes could be construed as harassment. The courts have ruled that a reasonable person could assume interaction with a government official could harbor a reasonable fear by the nature of your position per se. Colorado law defines harassment as when a person commits harassment if and with intent to harass, annoy, or alarm another person. Your insistence to use your position of power as a government official could be construed as harassment, especially when focused on certain individuals' businesses, which you deem an unfavored class. Mr. Lasis, I'm sure Ms. Carberry would be willing to provide a refresher course in how not to use one's position to harass a law-abiding member of the public exercising a lawful activity. Like I previously said, the only way forward is to work in cooperation with the pilot community and Rocky Mountain Metro Airport to implement voluntary changes. In that regard, Rocky Mountain Metro has implemented new voluntary procedures to help reduce noise. The airport has also commissioned new signage to remind pilots about being good neighbors, as well as updated the noise-sensitive map. The airport and its director, Paul Anslow, deserve accolades for trying to implement positive change. Let's keep this détente between the town and the airport moving forward by continued cooperation. Mr. Lasis, Mr. Ryan, it would be helpful if you both tempered your vitriol. Otherwise, it's possible your constituents won't receive the relief they are asking for. Respectfully, Brad Walker.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to presentation. I'm sorry, any additional public comment? Thank you. All right, we'll move on now to our presentation segment, item E, which is our economic development update.
Thank you, Mayor. Adam Hughes with Better City, who's our economic development consultant company for the town, is here to provide an update to the board on recent activities related to economic development.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Good evening, I mean. Before I begin, I'd like to take a minute and recognize a very special young boy in the town of Superior, Ryder Matz. Is here with us this evening. He recently won an award back in October for in the age category of 6 to 11 with a business that he runs called Ryder's Riches. And Ryder's business involves a gumball machine that travels around town and is supported by businesses in Louisville and Superior. And we wanted to just take a moment and recognize him. Ryder, could you stand and come to the pulpit? Come over here for just a second. We'd like to present you with a certificate of excellence for entrepreneurship.
Thank you.
Congratulations and thank you.
Why don't we get Ryder to come up? We'll have a photo with
Wonderful.
with Ryder and the board.
Okay.
Yeah. Why don't you just stand right there, and we'll stand here, and yeah, just face. Yeah, show us your certificate.
It's the important one first. One, two, three. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right, great work, Ryder. Congratulations. All right, thanks, Adam, for putting that together.
Okay. We're just going to keep this at a really high level. If any of you have any additional questions, we can dive deeper into any particular area We just wanted to summarize our 2019 accomplishments, things that we were working on, and then our 2020 scope of work and focus areas. Marketplace recruitment and redevelopment. We attended ICSC. We'll be also attending in February another conference that's more focused on entertainment and recreation uses. We met with Brixmor a couple months ago, and they provided some preliminary plans for redevelopment. They're looking at some tenant relocations that are going to take some time to move some chess pieces on the board. And they are in discussions with multifamily developers. We will be meeting with them in February at this conference as well to get an update from them on where things stand. We've conducted outreach, which involves kind of researching companies, seeing if they're a good fit, reaching out to about 4 dozen entertainment destination businesses. We do have 2 that have expressed interest in the market. One, which you're familiar with, we shared a memo on, Sequest, and another one is a Playhouse, which is like live theater and dinner. We need to find a place for them. They've got very specific square footage requirements, and we've conducted outreach to some of the existing property owners, but this may be a fit in, one of them, the Playhouse, may be a fit in downtown Superior. We talked with Bill Jenks about that. Sequest may be the Resolute site. The challenge that we're seeing is that just a lot of people aren't familiar with Superior, so we're starting to change it to North Denver, and people seem to understand that a little bit better. And then we also had 2 businesses contact us regarding Superior, one Heritage Pizza and Pitter Patter Boutique, and we've been just trying to work with them to find suitable space in the community. We'll continue to conduct outreach to entertainment and recreation uses. Again, I think this is really important to have offerings that are experiential within the community that are not subject to online competition. Any questions on this?
Hey, Adam, just a question. You said people aren't familiar with Superior, so North Denver is resonating. Yeah, no, sorry. So North Denver is resonating, but microphone's on. Okay. But East Boulder or some affiliation with Boulder is not getting the same traction?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the companies just aren't familiar with Colorado because they've got locations in other parts of the country, and they're looking to expand. They're in growth opportunities, looking at growth opportunities. And so, Superior, they don't really know. So what we're communicating to those that are outside the market is, hey, this is within the North Denver metro.
Thanks.
So I guess I actually had the same question as Neil, but do they know Boulder, or I'm just curious where our branding fits. Do we tend to be a Boulder or a Denver suburb?
Yeah, so it's both. As we engage in conversations with them, we tell them that Superior is within Boulder County, so you'll get the Boulder presence and also capture the North Denver metro area. So yeah. Any other questions on this? Okay. Hotel recruitment. This has been something that we've seen a lot of continued interest in the hotel development community. And the market has been more resilient than I think anticipated. I think we provided an update to the town board, maybe it was May or June, about kind of the status of the hotel industry, the hotel market. We continue to see developers still have interest in the what we call the North Denver submarket. I should say Highway 36 submarket. And every month we're kind of in communication with 3 or 4 hotel developers, and there are some that have continued to express interest, and they're performing due diligence on the market and are looking at, surprisingly, what the site that's garnering the most interest is the boutique hotel site. So these are the groups that we're currently working with. We're closing the loop with Radisson. They had expressed interest in having a flag in this market. We have a call with them later this week. Any questions on this? Okay. In terms of the office use, we completed the cluster workforce analysis. We completed the office marketing brochure. We actually sent that out to a graphic designer to make it look really professional. and conducted outreach to a lot of office-based businesses outside of the state. I just wanted to make a note that the Metro Denver EDC has a code of ethics that we have to follow in terms of when we approach businesses. They're very strict about communities trying to cherry pick primary job creators from one community to another. So we have to be very careful in terms of how we navigate through that. And we've had some really good meetings with Metro Denver EDC. I attended their quarterly economic development professionals meeting last week. They're doing some strategic outreach, and what we'd like to do is travel with them to in-market, what they call in-market visits, where they go to San Francisco or Dallas and visit with companies that are looking at possibly expanding into the Denver area. We did reach out to some of the co-working groups. There was one that had expressed interest. I believe that was Industry and Novell. And the others have radius protections that prohibit them from doing a location in Superior. But this is an area that's seeing a lot of headwinds right now, but we'll continue to conduct outreach there. There's a local firm that had reached out and wanted some assistance with finding a building that they could purchase, but we just didn't have a building that fit their needs. And we tried to work with some property owners within the community. Discovery Office Park, we talked with the owner there, and he's open to entertaining offers for property. And we think that would be really critical to bring in a developer that's willing to go vertical and make some space available. And so we're going to be focusing on that moving forward. We think that's critical. We need to get some supply in the market. So we're going to be working on that. Any questions on this? Food and beverage recruitment. This was based on some market research that we conducted that showed breweries kind of being flat in terms of their growth trajectory, but wineries, cideries, craft distilleries seeing double-digit growth. And we're getting a lot of interest in the Superior market in those three categories. We had a site visit today with a distillery that was interested in the Land Rover building because of the clear heights and the space that was available. And they loved it. They loved that building. So they're going to be putting together an LOI. We'll provide that to you and seek to just get direction from the town board on how you'd like us to pursue that. But, a couple months ago, I asked if that was something you wanted us to pursue, and you gave us the green light. So we've been continuing to pursue that. If we get enough interest, we may not need to attend one of those conferences that we had mentioned. So we're kind of feeling that out to see if that's going to be a need or not. Any questions on this? Okay. In terms of Colton Road, we reached out to business incubators and accelerators, provided a memo on Innisphere, where they've got interest in creating or having a presence in Superior. And some of the other groups we had conversations with, and they were not interested, primarily because it just wasn't a good fit. But we're also talking about the Young Americans program that introduced us to Ryder. I think is a really great, valuable asset to have that teaches children how to have financial responsibility and entrepreneurship. And, we really need to foster entrepreneurship within the community. So we're exploring that as well. We provided some information on a village concept, which would, I think, work really well in certain areas of the community, and some other kind of miscellaneous items. We had conducted outreach to the businesses along Colton Road and have been trying to attempt to have a roundtable discussion, but we're not finding much in terms of interest. They're all running businesses and are very busy. But I think having a more, I would say, broad vision of that is going to be important, how we can integrate those businesses, some of the industries that we highlighted that could locate into that corridor and have interest, and the outdoor amenities to try and intertwine those together, creating a really great destination. I know that you're going through the process now with Happy City, and that they're going to be delivering their report later this quarter. So it'd be good to see their recommendations and how we can kind of work within those frameworks. Any questions on this? Okay. We've conducted what we call, business retention and expansion, reaching out to local businesses, conducting interviews, talking with the Chamber of Commerce, went and presented to their board retreat, interviewing office firm businesses, really trying to understand what their needs are if they're looking at expanding, and trying to identify those that might be at risk of relocating so we can try and address any needs. We've also been providing the C-Source market advisory reports, and this is going to become more powerful this year. We're switching over to another platform, and we'll have more granularity in terms of points of origin and visitations as well. But we've been tracking visitation in Superior Marketplace, Superior Plaza, Colton Road, and it's going to be really helpful as we go out to conferences and be able to share that information with potential prospects as well. And the retail analysis, we've been completing that every quarter. We're trying to improve incrementally. Every month. We're trying to improve incrementally every month, adding some additional information. As you go through the reports, you'll see that we've added a tremendous amount more detail every month to keep track of where retail is, how retail is performing. And then as we are performing outreach, we're mentioning growth that's happening in the corridor with the Medtronic campus, with downtown Superior, and that certainly is really helping to lubricate those discussions. In your packet, we can see kind of the vacancy rate, what's happening within 20 miles of Superior. We've had some demolition and some new construction. Same with office, but we're seeing vacancy rates within the last quarter kind of go down, which is good. This should be hotel analysis, so this isn't labeled correctly. But we're continuing to see resiliency in this. There's a lot of supply that's coming out of the market, but there's been job growth to support it in primary industries. And, we're continuing to have conversations with hotel developers. Work plan communications, won't really touch on that. But the 2020 scope of work, we'll continue with recruitment, with business retention and expansion. We'll work to try and build community in certain areas where we can, provide data reports, and communicate regularly with the town board. And with that, any questions? Anything that we should be doing that we're not doing that you'd like us to focus on?
It's funny you asked that, because I have the exact same question for you. So from our perspective here in town, is there anything that we should be doing differently, or that we can add? You've been here for a year now, that we can add to our economic development efforts that we're not doing. So from your perspective, working with other clients, looking at just other municipalities, what aren't we doing that we could be to help increase our chances of success in bringing in these companies?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of areas that we always try and improve or enhance, and one is entrepreneurship. Another one is sense of place, placemaking, and just creating an opportunity for businesses that are going to be destinations to come in. I think the town is providing great leadership in terms of purchasing that Land Rover building. I think that represents a huge opportunity for really changing the character and identity of that corridor. And we'd like to interface with the town board and get direction in terms of what you'd like to see there, so we can really focus in our efforts, make sure that we're bringing opportunities that align with what you want to see there.
One of the things I'll be interested to see what comes out of the Happy City report is how much of this placemaking comes through in terms of branding Superior overall. From your perspective, do we need to make any changes to our branding as a town to help attract these types of businesses that we're out looking for?
I think so, and I think you've got some really great human capital in the community that really knows branding and marketing well. And I would think having maybe roundtable discussion with those individuals, getting their thoughts and input would be really helpful. And that may lead to maybe bringing in a firm that could help kind of define and enhance the brand, I think would be helpful. But a lot of individuals that I've met with, one of the comments that they said is, the town needs a brand,
Yeah,
like a defined brand. And I don't think that placemaking effort is going to get you there.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think that it's got some ideas in there, but there are firms that really specialize in creating brands for communities, and I think having a group of skilled individuals from the community sit on maybe a subcommittee to help guide that process, I think would be really good.
Okay, appreciate that. I know that you've been communicating well with the town manager, and the mayor is going to a conference with you. Is there any additional need for support, FaceTime from the board itself for anything you're doing to help attract and land some of these companies you're speaking with?
Possibly when conversations advance to more than just, hey, we've got interest in the market, when it comes down to let's really decide on what the town wants, in terms of the boutique hotel or the Land Rover building, that might be a time where we visit one-on-one with maybe a town trustee.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's interest in the board in providing that support. So if you need that support, make sure you ask.
Okay.
And I have a question along those lines, Dan. This is going to be for you. Certainly, I want to make sure that we have a reputation as being a business-friendly community. It's why I think it's so important for us to foster strong relations with the chamber. But with regard to actually meeting with potential businesses coming in, where does that fall? I mean, I wouldn't want to meet with a business right as they're about to come in, and I'm having to make a decision on whatever sort of license or development they might be doing.
Yeah, so you're talking about kind of like an initial meeting before they were to, say, apply for a business license?
Exactly. I mean, I'm just thinking, to your point, Adam, it doesn't make sense to necessarily do it early on, but I don't want to wait till too late in the process where then there's going to be some bias by fostering that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the only thing that we would want to try to avoid if they're doing some kind of business license. We don't want to show some kind of preference with sitting down with them beforehand. But I mean, that's certainly something we can kind of give you more of a,
Okay.
A better overview of.
Okay.
That's kind of my initial reaction.
And so then, Adam, I guess my question for you would be, right now, do we have a reputation as being a business-friendly community, candidly, or is it something where people are afraid our board is going to say no to anything they want to do?
Well, it depends on what the product is. I know that there's one hotel developer that was looking at doing a certain product type that would probably say no. But there are a number of businesses that, and I don't think it's the town or anything that the town can do. I think it's just the market, that rental rates are inherently expensive. But there's nothing the town could do to lower a rental rate in a private development. I think the interaction that the town has with developers is really dependent on their level of sophistication. A very sophisticated developer is going to come in, they're going to put in an application, they're going to interact with staff, and they're going to see that they're very responsive. I think it really depends on, is the developer willing to put in the upfront time, effort, and money that's required to get an application that is ready for review. And we see that in every community. It really depends on who you talk to. Some are going to say, yeah, they're not business friendly because they want me to do this. Well, yeah, but that's standard, right? And so you need to recognize that there may be chirpings out there of people who are saying, well, the town's not business friendly or whatever, but they need to do their part, right? They need to meet the standards that the town's setting.
Sure. And then in any of those early discussions with businesses, has our sales tax rate come up as a concern?
Yes.
Okay.
Rental rate, sales tax, common area maintenance, so CAM charges, kind of everything across the board has come up. But I don't think people are going to pay a premium to be here because you've got high median incomes and you've got a great workforce. And so they're going to have to bear some costs in order to be present in the market.
Okay, thanks.
Adam, recently I got an email from a person who said, I'm looking to relocate to Superior. Can you send me a packet on Superior. And we don't have such a packet, and the chamber doesn't really have such a packet. We don't have a visitors bureau, and I don't think we need one. But what, from your opinion in working with other cities and towns, I guess, what do we need at a minimum, and what could we have, readily available to send to those kind of inquiries? And I think that will, I really think that's a key part of attracting businesses, because a lot of them are going to be bringing people, and those people are going to want to relocate, and so they'll just kind of want a central landing place for where do I go for housing information, where do I go for recreation, is kind of a landing page or pages with all of that kind of in one spot.
I think we have that, right? Didn't you create that, Adam?
So we created some brochures for particular uses that we've been distributing, but we haven't created a portal or a platform for businesses or a link where they can go. Other communities have what's called a one-stop shop, where they can go. It has all the information on business licensing, information on incentives, information on available properties.
This particular person, I think, was looking just residentially. I mean, maybe they were retired. They didn't give a lot of detail on who they were or why they were wanting to come to Superior, but I'm thinking of this more of from a residential standpoint. And that does play into businesses, because all the business people are going to have people coming in to live here. So maybe just, I don't need you can just kind of think about that and get back to us on that.
Okay, maybe a brochure that just highlights the quality of life, amenities in the community.
Sure.
Job centers, employment centers. That's something that we could put together if you'd like us to.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Adam, one of the things we're going to be doing later tonight is during our retreat is talking about town board goals, town manager goals. I'm curious whether you have any goals specifically to give us that, we'd be able to measure whether 2020 is a success or not. You don't necessarily need to give that to us right now off the top of your head, but maybe the next time that you come back and report to us, I'd really like to have, 3 or 4 concrete goals that we could look back at the end of the year and then see whether or not we've achieved those goals.
Certainly, yeah, we can put something like that together that has some, measurable performance metrics associated with it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone have anything else? All right, Adam, thank you very much for the presentation. All right, next on our agenda is advisory committee interviews.
Two of the individuals that were scheduled to be for interviews, Sandy Kerfman and Erica Booth, have both withdrawn their applications. It seemed like from their response to staff, it was more of a time commitment thing, more than anything was the reason for their withdrawal. So we just have the one interview tonight with David Weingart. If you want to come up to the podium, please.
Welcome, David. Thank you for your interest. If you want to just start by a quick little introduction on yourself and kind of what drew you to apply, and we'll have some board member questions.
Sure. My name is David Weingarten. I moved here to Superior from Denver in July of 2018. My family and I live in Rock Creek, and my kids go to El Dorado. And so I am in the music business. I work at Z2 Entertainment so I bring in all the live music to the Boulder Theater and the Fox Theater in Chautauqua, and we have 4 other venues as well that we book throughout the state of Colorado. And all my professional life, I've been in the music business, in addition to some nonprofit work as well, nonprofit music work. And I am always been a big proponent of making sure that I'm a part of the community, or really wanting to bring art, music, and culture to the communities that I live in. And I think it's really important that helps bring the uniqueness to a community. It keeps people here, it keeps people interested. I can certainly appreciate a lot of the different towns and cities, you know, but I think that when you have all these, you know, the art, music, and the culture, the things that kind of like make things unique and have spark interest from all the different, all the families to all, you know, to young kids, to teenagers, to whatever, they certainly appreciate that in all respects. And so it's really important to me and to my family that, you know, the fact that we're based here now and don't expect to move anytime soon, I'd love to be a part of that and to help Superior grow in that capacity.
Well, great. We appreciate you applying. Questions from the board?
Hi, Dave. Usually I ask, have you had an opportunity to attend the committee meeting? But I know you did because I staffed CAPS the other night. Based on the fact that you attended the meeting and, you know, what were your initial impressions and what do you think in particular you might be able to bring? And you got to hear the presentation from Happy City for the work plan. You know, did you have a sense of how you might be able to really roll in, push your sleeves up and get involved?
Right. Well, yeah, I think what Superior has going on right now with the plan is pretty impressive. I mean, it seems like a really good time to get involved in that. And I think that I do about 600 concerts a year with throughout the different venues, and we have about, you know, just on the logistics aspect and the planning and all the other stuff that goes along with it. You know, there's a lot of logistics and a lot of things that go into all the different events that we do. And so being a part of a team that's working on that, I certainly could help facilitate. I have a lot of connections within, you know, the music industry and the entertainment field and the production teams and whatnot. So I think that, you know, there's kind of like, seems like a nice fit for my professional life. Hope that made sense.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. Thank you for applying and welcome. You've been here about a year?
About a year and a half, July of 2018.
Great. Welcome.
Right.
We talked about sort of the brand and a little earlier, when even on, you know, your different music venues each have a different brand associated with them. You know, the Fox is different than anything else, right? So when you think, what do you think about the brand in Superior in cultural arts? That committee sometimes thinks about that brand and identity for the community. What do you think about our identity is today, and what do you think our identity could transition to?
From a performing arts standpoint or from an artistic standpoint, I don't necessarily know if there is much of a brand recognition in that respect. I feel like, you know, as far as like an entertainment hub, you know, that would probably be more Boulder and Denver, and then you got First Bank Center and everything that's happening sort of downtown there, but mostly that's centered around First Bank. So there's no centralized place right now, but downtown Superior could definitely be one of those places where you could be bringing in a lot of different things, you know, whether it's, you know, art or music or culture, all of it, you know, on a pretty consistent basis, whether it's farmers markets, to, you know, on the weekends to, you know, free music festivals or for shows or whatever it might be downtown or into potential different venues in and around our storefronts even. But that's important. And during the meeting, they were talking about compiling potentially a list of all the the creative types, you know, within the community. And I think that that's super important because they obviously want to rally around that as well.
Okay, thank you.
David, I appreciate you applying and really excited about your resume. I think you're going to bring great experience to the committee. This is one of our more enthusiastic committees, and they meet twice per month. Yeah. Do you have any conflicts that would prevent you from regularly attending meetings?
Not, I mean, with the exception of a few conferences per year, and then I also have shows that I'm regularly out at night. I try to go to most of my shows, the ones in Boulder, but those aren't until later on at night, so I don't see it as being an issue.
Thank you so much for interviewing. I was really excited to see your resume and your experience.
Oh, good.
I had a question. So I saw you moved, July 2018 is when you moved
Right.
here. Did you have a chance to attend any of the Sounds of Simon house concerts that were put on in Superior before that?
No, but
Okay.
I do know about them. I
Okay.
have some friends that live, within Rock Creek, and they had sent me some things saying, hey, are you interested? So I'm definitely aware of those concerts that were
Okay.
happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think a concept like that would be great in Superior and certainly could
Sure.
leverage some of your connections with Swallow Hill to potentially get some artists in here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whatever
Great,
we can do.
thanks.
David, thank you for applying. Have you had the opportunity to attend Chili Fest?
I haven't been to Chili Fest just yet, but I did do, what did we do? My family and I just were at one of the things recently, but I wasn't able to make Chili Fest. But, the pancake thing.
4th of July?
Yeah, the 4th of
Yeah.
July.
So Chili Fest is one of the few opportunities that we actually have live music here.
Right.
In Superior with the Boulder Valley Beer Fest and Superior's Chili Fest. So I would definitely recommend that you check it out this September when it's occurring, because
Oh, yeah.
it's definitely one of the most popular events that we have here in town. The other thing that I'd recommend you, if you're not already familiar with, just in terms of the plans for downtown Superior, we recently just approved the commercial core, which includes a kind of a common area, green, that has a stage built into it. And kind of the idea behind that area would be, that would be really the area where farmers markets could be and regular concerts. And in addition to that, the parks that are approved to be built in downtown Superior, there's also an amphitheater that's going to be part of that design. So I think it's great that you're bringing, a musical background to the CAPS committee. I think the CAPS committee has done really great things for this town in helping to, create an identity, a brand, cultural awareness. But I think music has been something that they could definitely benefit from. So
Sure.
I'm thrilled that you're volunteering your time, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, David, thank you.
Sure.
Final question that I ask all of our applicants for all of our committees is about conflict of interest. Is there anything in your, professional life that might be, or personal life that might be a potential for conflict of interest, like you had a side business where you were trying to benefit somehow from membership in a committee or commission?
No.
Okay.
Not that I can really think of right now, but. no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Most people don't. We just
Right.
have to ask the question. So,
Sure.
okay, thank you very much. We'll be acting on this at a future meeting.
Okay, great.
So, thank you.
Thanks for everybody's time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, with that being our final interview, we will move on to the consent agenda. We have 4C, which has been pulled by Trustee Shaw. And just so the public is aware of what we're doing there, when items are on the consent agenda, we don't have discussion on them. They're just voted and passed through. And there was concern among the board that there was not adequate time to hear from committee chairs on their work plans. And so we're going to push this to the first meeting in February to allow the committee chairpersons to come in and make a brief presentation to the board and have any dialogue that the board would like to have on these work plans before they are acted on and approved. So this item 4C is being pulled off in an entirety to continue to the next board meeting. Is there anything else anybody wanted to say on that? Okay. And then 4I has been pulled by Trustee Ryan. We'll act on that here shortly. So we'll, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with 4C and 4I removed.
I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you to Sandy for agreeing to step into my shoes, because I'm not going to be able to be here on the February 10th meeting. So that's what we're going to be acting on 4J. So Trustee Hammerly will be manning the gavel. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis. Second by Mayor Folsom. And we'll need a roll call vote on the consent.
Lasis,
Yes.
Hammerling,
Yes.
Folsom,
Yes.
Lish,
Yes.
Swazinski,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda passes unanimously, and we have 4I, which is adoption of a resolution approving an agreement for pre-construction services for the 88th Street Improvement Project with Goodland Construction Incorporated. Trustee Ryan.
Great. So thanks. Just Matt, I wanted to maybe talk to you and Alex about this as I sort of helpful cover memo and some detail here. Maybe provide a talk track over this, and then as I understand it, this will really be a construction management and general contractor agreement. So they will effectively, instead of doing a real competitive bid for the 88th Street improvement, all things go well, we'll negotiate with the selected contractor for that price without a competitive bid. So it's an important decision. I forgot to look it up. Let's just start with, what's the total budgeted amount this year for the 88th Street improvement?
The total budget amount is $3 million. Right. But that is contingent on $1 million contribution from a developer from the development that you haven't approved yet. So right. Effectively we have $2 million improvements. We may have $3 million depending on whether that project. So there's those things that are going on that makes this project difficult to bid out.
Right. I hear you. Just my thinking is I'm looking at a $16,000 contract, approval for a $16,000 contract that is effectively, and I recognize it's not going to be the approval of the $2 or $3 million future. That will come back to the board. Okay. But if I understand it correctly, we're going to affect design with the intent that Goodland will, in fact, be the contractor. So anyway, so why don't we back up? You provide I don't remember, and maybe I may have missed it. I've missed a couple meetings in the last few months, regrettably. So maybe provide some talk track around the construction management, general contractor concept that we're utilizing here. I know we're doing it for a different building, for a construction building, but I didn't realize we were doing it for this, so.
Well, the reason why I recommend it to the town manager that we follow this approach is that what keeps me up at night is how are we going to build 88th Street? How do we get it done with minimizing the traffic disruption? Unlike McCaslin or Colton, where we had 4 lanes and we could divert traffic over, we're reconstructing the road with 8 or 9,000 vehicles per day. So how do we get it built with minimizing the amount of disruption we have to the traveling public? Plus we have a small window. We don't want to do that necessarily during school time when we have school students using that road. So in order to get the expertise of a contractor on board to really discuss with them the ramifications of different ways of doing it. Do we close the road for a couple months? Do we do it keeping the road open but having lane closures? What are the ramifications both in time to construct, plus, the time of does it take 6 months if you do it with lane closures versus 2 months with a road closure or a month with a road closure? I want to know those things. The other thing that we have is the board has discussed the desire to maybe do a roundabout at the Promenade intersection. And if we're going to close the road, maybe this would be a good time to do it. So it'd be nice to know whether that could be done, what the cost would be, and let you guys make that decision. Also, in order to have good subcontractors, we want to have control over who does the subcontractor work. As you recall, this summer with Colton Road, we had a low bid and the paving went pretty smoothly, but the concrete sub that was on the job really fell down in terms of scheduling. We closed the dog park for several months when it should have been, a 3 or 4 week process, and that dog park was closed because the sub didn't perform. So I want to have better control over the contractor and the subs that we have on site to get this project done because of the short window that we have to construct it. And the construction management manager, the CMGC approach gets the contractor on board earlier on in the process. And we get together as a team in terms of the designer, the owner, the town board, because there's going to be decisions that the town board will weigh in on in terms of traffic control and the length of closures. So we have a team put together early on in the process that we can work through some of these options. And so I've given you the benefits of doing this. Contractor gets on board, really gets together with the designer and really studies what the risk is, what can go wrong, and what can we do to be prepared for it and to mitigate the risks. It gives us some innovation, especially in traffic control. How are we going to handle traffic? You know, can we brainstorm different ways and really minimize the impact on the traveling public? We have a construction model that we would build, the contractor would build, and we can cost out various design options. You know, if we have budget problems, do we build a trail this year? Do we build a roundabout? Do we go all the way to Rock Creek Parkway? Trustee Ryan, you asked during the project with Colton, why don't you go all the way to McCaslin? Well, we didn't have the contractor on board. We didn't have the construction costs to be able to give you those costs. In this case, we'll have the contractor on board and working with us to answer those types of questions. So the downside may be, first, you know, cost validation. And so how do we handle that? Well, one way we could handle that is to get an independent cost estimator. It's another cost, but we could bring on someone else. Hey, when the contractor gives us prices, you tell us whether they're you know, a true value. You know, what's coming out in the marketplace. What are you seeing? Is asphalt going up or not? And the cost that he's giving us, is that a good cost or not? So that's one way we could do that. J&T, our designer, has a lot of information, and he can provide that check on the contractor pricing. The other thing we have with Goodland is that they did a project for us 2 years ago. We have all their unit prices from that project. They were low bidder. If they come out with a unit price that's substantially out of whack from what they gave us 2 years ago, we can, you know, call them on it and discuss it. So I think that's probably where your biggest concern is cost validation. So those are the methods we can use to try to make sure we're getting the best value for the dollar we're going to spend. And to me, my fear is that the project drags out. We had a project with the roundabout, as you recall, on McCaslin that took almost 2 years to build because we didn't have a contract that we can control and really plan that work out. Here, I want to bring on a contractor early on in the process, ask these hard questions about scheduling and about design options and get their professional opinion on how to go. That's why I'm recommending this strategy. And again, it's been used very often in the building trade with building projects, not so often in the transportation world, but CDOT's using it on I-25, Fort Collins has used it, Boulder County used it. So it's becoming more a process that's been used by transportation agencies.
But have we ever used this within our town?
We had it in place when we were using the town hall edition that never got going.
I'm sorry, for what?
The town hall edition.
Oh, okay. The one that okay.
And by the way, I used this process when I built the Boulder County Jail when I worked for Boulder County.
Has Goodland had experience with this type of, in any of their previous contracts? I know they've been around forever.
Yes, they have.
Do we have a representative from Goodland here tonight?
Not tonight, no.
Okay. So I mean, I get it, right? So I get the advantages, right? If there's a couple uncertainties associated with this road, which I'd like to eliminate those uncertainties personally, because I don't think we should be doing anything. We shouldn't be entering an important construction project with uncertainties, so we should eliminate those in advance. And second, this is, you know, one of 4 or 5 ways in and out of town. And, you know, you shut down a road for months, particularly if this drags on and goes into the school, there's significant risk. So the project timeline is significant risk. Absolutely 100% agree with that. My first job almost 30 years ago was as a contracting officer for the Public Health Service. And so I've run a lot of big procurements and look at this. And there are a couple different contracting methods. And, one is contract by negotiation, which is effectively what you'll do. And there are ways to mitigate that risk by getting independent bids and your past experience. But competitive bid is demonstrated to be the most effective way of sourcing this work. It's how it's consistent. I don't think what you're proposing here is inconsistent with our town code, but the competitive process for a defined scope of work is more consistent with our town code. So I do not want to make an important decision like this without significant narrative. My current, and while I appreciate what you said, I'm just not convinced that we're going to be able to mitigate the risks associated with this. I really want to get 88th Street done. It is my priority. It's this board's priority for construction this year. I'm just really worried about selecting our partner over a $16,000 competitive bid that we're going to end up spending potentially $3 million with and negotiate, hopefully in good faith with them. And I know we have some past experience, but not a ton of past experience with them. So, McCaslin was a good outcome, but there were some delays on that one too. There's always delays. So with these projects. Anyways, I don't know if other people have thoughts, but my current inclination is to see what we could do to pivot this towards a more traditional RFP.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for pulling this because I had some of the similar concerns. So I went back to the Colton cover memo. Goodland was the second lowest bidder. And we gave the contract to Asphalt. There's a difference of 10%, 2.8 million versus 3.1 million. So that's not an immaterial difference. So, and I get that we can try to work with them, but absent sort of RFP process,
Sure.
How do you know that you're not potentially overpaying the 10%?
Sure. The immaterial difference was in the concrete sub that was used. The paving, they were actually lower. I think the paving was about the same. The concrete work was lower, and we paid for it with the delays we had. So, I mean, that to me is what keeps me up.
I share Kevin's concern in space because this is one of the biggest road contracts we've had in a long time. There are a number of moving parts on this, which, absent that road, I think every kid is going to try to ride their bike to school or something because there's just no way to get there. So it absolutely has to be done by mid-point of August. And if this is one of the better ways to mitigate it, we can pull in a third-party estimator to sort of ensure that we're getting as close as possible to the best price. I think I'm directionally.
Yeah, I mean, a third party would be $15,000, $20,000, and they would, verify what Goodland submits in terms of their guaranteed maximum price and advise the board whether that's a fair price or not. That's one way to mitigate it. To me, I'm looking at how do I get this done with the conditions we have with the school and so forth.
Just a question on the schedule, because we've been talking about 88 since I got on the board a year ago. So we definitely punted on it last year because we thought Zaharias was going to come forward. We still don't know what Zaharias is, but we've made the decision we're going to move forward. What has anything stopped you from pushing this? I mean, we could have talked about this in November. We approved it in the budget. I just want to know what we can do to give you more time. I mean, absent going.
Again, I have to go through a procurement process, which I did on this, and it took me 6 weeks to get to this point. Okay. Right. The design team has been working all along. We got the road surveyed. We got plan development. We're ready to have our kickoff meeting and start the whole process involving Goodland. But it took me 6 weeks to get, and then I had holidays to get to this point. And so I'm getting a contractor on board probably 3 months before I would have normally. Normally the budget is approved in November. I have to design it. I bid it out for about 6 weeks, and I get a contractor to you usually in end of April, 1st of May, and they don't get going till June. And then I have a contractor I haven't worked with before, and I have to get them up to speed on all the implications of what this project means.
Thanks.
So I've been working, that's why I want to keep going on this project, and I'm bringing to you a method and a contractor that I think has worked here in the past. We have cost information from the 3 we interviewed, and they're all, kind of comparable for not just the pre-con, but we asked for other things as well. They're all pretty comparable in what they submitted.
So I think Neil and Kevin raised some good points, but just so the record is clear, Alex, the contract that we're looking at tonight, which was competitively bidded out, is $16,000, and there's no requirement that we need to necessarily move forward with Goodland for the actual construction of 88th, correct?
Right, we're just signing,
we're still going to see
what the scope of service is in there.
Before any asphalt is poured, any roads are torn up, we have the opportunity to review the plans and make decisions
and
as to
remove
whether
the
or not.
GMP. What part of their scope is to present to you a GMP that they could build.
Right, but
if you want to.
Okay, to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Right, but I agree. It's absolutely what it says. But if, we're talking whatever the time, if we're late January today, we're going to go, I think you get traditionally, and I've done this type of contractual, I've done this before, right? So you'll get 60, 70% of the way there, you have some scope, and then you sort of bid it out. They bid it, they're going to be the general contractor. I think we've committed, they have to do at least 30% of the work, which is, again, I think a good practice, right? So they just can't sub the whole thing out. All very traditional, very good practice. But the reality of, by the time we're in March or April, they have all the cards. In the negotiation, if they come with, it's $3.7 million, and we are unsuccessful in negotiating, we have no option but to either say no or pay the $3.7 million or to de-scope, and we bring it out to, a couple hundred yards or something, or we narrow the road, somehow we find a way to de-scope. That's my worry. We have, if we're going to do a traditional type of procurement, design the road, send it out to bid, get firm bids, and then there's some contingencies because there's always change orders in there. But even this one will have, we've already agreed with this. The unusual thing about this is they're going to design it with us, and then they still agree that there's going to be a contingency. They're not, there's not going to be a maximum price. There's a maximum price, and then there's a contingency. So we're not going to have a change. We will not have the opportunity to change our mind.
No, that's incorrect. We're giving them a budget, and we're saying, can you build it? Here's your budget. Tell us what you can build. What's the problems in meeting that budget, and what are some options in meeting the budget? The other alternative is that you could bid it out, and it can come in at $3.5 million, and then you're stuck. What do we do? How do we get it down to our budget, or taking another $1.5 million into it? So that's the other danger you had by going through the bidding process.
We've worked with Goodland before, and they've demonstrated that they're a professional outfit. They've done good work for the town. They've had a good working relationship with the town, and they certainly don't want to sour their relationship with the town. And there's going to be future work. There's going to be other road projects in the future. There's going to be future construction that they're going to certainly want to be considered. And if they do something that turns us off on them, that's not going to endear them to future boards in terms of awarding future contracts. I think also, given we need to be pragmatic about things, and if you look at what's going on in Colorado right now, just with the amount of construction, the amount of development right now, finding good contractors and good subcontractors is really challenging. And you can just see with some of the residential development in Superior itself that somehow it starts to grind to a halt, and it's because they're having a hard time finding a good sub for the project that they need at that point in time. And if the projects aren't proceeding quick enough, they're going to be moving on to the next project, and that's going to slow things down. So that there's a possibility that if we went and a more traditional route, got the plans done, and then bidded this project out, that this wouldn't get done as quickly. We could have delays in finding reputable contractors and subcontractors to work with us. So I'm inclined to defer to Alex's expertise and experience working with Goodland. 88th is long overdue, and I think they're going to do it right. I'm willing to take a leap of faith here knowing that we have a budget that's going to, keep this, capped at a certain amount. And, it's going to cost what it's going to cost. But the one thing that we know is if it doesn't get done this year, it's going to cost more next year.
So I'll echo Mark's sentiments, but add a different viewpoint as well, that my day job as an auditor, the federal agency that I'm responsible for auditing, we do lots of construction projects of large scientific facilities that it's not an off-the-shelf product. They oftentimes build with firms that have contracts similar to this, and at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to go back and audit them and see how well did they actually perform, did we stay within cost, and hearing Alex's answers to the questions we already asked are good answers. When I'm hearing that we're going to look at an independent cost estimate, that's something that we basically have required management to do from here on out on these types of projects before we move forward. The one thing that our audits do find when there's cost overruns or when there are issues is that it comes down to management of the contract and ensuring that we actually had people hands-on in the mix and that the contractors didn't have the opportunity to stray too far off. So this is one of those contracting methods where I think it's important that there is close and constant communication between Alex and your staff with the contractor. But I'm absolutely with Mark on this one. This is a high order of magnitude of risk if something goes wrong. If we bleed into the school year, if all of a sudden we can't get our concrete, I mean, the dog park, how many emails, whether it was Facebook messages, emails directly to us, that was a dog park. Let's put that onto 88 if we run into these problems. If we're hearing from Alex and Matt that this type of contracting method is our absolute best chance of making sure we can alleviate these risks, I am willing to move forward with that, with the controls that Alex mentioned, where we actually have past historical prices with the firm. We have a designer on staff they're contracted with. They can give us a idea and then, if necessary, get an independent cost estimate. And if it comes down to it and something's unreasonable, we say no. We say no, and that'll be a hard decision for us, but I'm willing to go with our town management and move forward with this.
Go ahead, Neil.
Just a question. I don't know if this is typical government work, so someone can correct me, but given the hard date we had in August, can we bake in a financial penalty for going past our drop-dead date of completion?
Can we give the contractor?
If they go past, say, August 15th, in which case, I think school starts on the 15th. But whatever the school day is, back it up to a 3. And that really has to be done by that point, because if it isn't, we're going to pitchforks that side of it.
Well, the traffic control in the interview process, that was our pitch. The most important thing to us is meeting a schedule and causing the least amount of traffic disruption. What are your ideas of doing it? And a couple of things came out, an early action package. Maybe we don't have a GMP, but we want to order pipe. Let's get some long lead items and start going before we have the full thing, the full GMP going. We have liquidated damages in all our construction contracts, so we can, look at that and maybe even increase it for certain things. Let's say we have a road closure, and I want to just prep you. We could be having a full road closure here for a month or 2 months. If we do, we have a significant penalty for going over a certain period of that road closure or lane closures. But we will, discuss it. That's one of the most important things as we go through the process. How do we get this done? Do we work on Saturdays? Do we work, longer periods? What can we do to get this done during that summer? We don't want to go past August 15th with the major disruption. I think we'll have what we've had over the last couple of years during the midday periods during school. Maybe you can have lane closures and do some finishing work on the project. But closing it down, paving or whatever during that period is a no-no.
Yeah, I want to comment on I'm worried that we're conflating two issues. There's the contract and there's the procurement or contracting, right? So unambiguously, we want to minimize this and minimize the disruption to the community. But it's the best way to get there. We have the opportunity today to get there through competition. In my experience, and a lot of us have this experience, whether or not for your businesses, you're competing against something, or whether or not you're purchasing and you're hiring suppliers, the best way to see that innovation is through competition. We are going to restrict that, and we will be negotiating with a single party who hopefully will come to the table in good faith. And yeah, we will be prepared to make those hard decisions to say no. And we'll be prepared to, of course, I think you've gotten the message around the independent cost estimate and anything else that we could do that would be a best practice. But let's not kid ourselves to think that, we've all done this internally with our own lives. If you hire a neighbor to redo a bathroom because, it's better. You get to walk through the tub supply store to get the right tub with them. Sometimes that works out, but sometimes it doesn't. This is legitimate risk, and we have a little bit of experience, but an N of 1 with this company. I two things.
How do you get competitiveness in trying to meet schedule? I mean, you could put very strict restrictions in when they have to get it done and build it.
We've known about 88th for a long time. We tried to do 88th.
But I'm putting it in the contract.
Alex, let me finish, because you corrected me saying I was incorrect around the contingency, and I'm looking at the contract that says they're going to build in the contingency, so I was not incorrect around that, right? So we've known about 88th for a long time. We wanted to do 88th in 2019, and because of things completely outside of our control with the adjacent Zaharias property, we decided to push it to 2020. Commitment from this board that we're going to do it in 2020, or at least we're going to try to do it unless something crazy happens. But this is the construction project priority for the year. But there's no reason why we can't design this road today with certainty. The uncertainty is where the money comes from. The uncertainty is whether or not the developer is going to contribute any amount of money. But the certainty of how the road can and should be designed, there's no reason why we cannot create that certainty today. The issue, I thought the issue, it surprises me to hear that, there's still some open thinking around a potential roundabout. I thought we closed that roundabout. I thought we had certainty for what this road was supposed to look like. The uncertainty, and where you have me, is you want to partner with somebody because this is such a vital throughway and make sure that there's access in and out of the community. We minimize the amount of closure, and I like the idea of partnering with them. But the design of the road today, I believe, should be relatively certain. And if it's not, let's create that certainty. And if that's the barrier to an RFP, because we haven't done that design, I think we could solve that problem. So that's the surprise to that. I mean, that to me, that's the surprise, that we're uncertain around how the road's going to be designed. I thought that was done.
Okay, I haven't heard from everybody, but I'm prepared to move forward on this. I think that the plan that's laid out here is sound and is going to get this thing done with the least amount of disruption. And to me, that's the most critical component of this. Others?
I mean, I'll just echo that. I think it's a big risk with 88th Street being so important to our community. I'd like to ensure it gets done as seamlessly as possible, even if that means we do spend a little bit more on it.
Okay. Sandy, ready? Okay, let's.
I just want to say a little bit after what Alex or what Kevin said. And, I mean, one of the things that Alex did talk to a little bit, and the industry is moving in a greater direction towards design build. My company's going in that direction. We're spending a lot more effort with our contractor than we would have in the past. We've gone through an enormous amount of bake-off at the front end prior to the design of our facilities, and we're handing it all off, recognizing that we might pay a little bit more, but it's a full, open book, transparent, working relationship. I think, as Ken laid out, we've got some opportunity here with Goodland to ensure that we're getting the best price, but it is going to take a tremendous amount of work from staff. And that's some of my concern here now, too, is are we staffed up enough on the town side to oversee the scope of this contract, as opposed to the contracts in the past? I mean, are we? Like, I don't know.
No, I think this, we have a consultant on board that's familiar with this process, familiar with the road design. I think, we'll be picking this contractor's brain pretty heavily to make sure that we ask the questions to how you get this thing done. I'm not as worried about that. Maybe other things may slide, but I mean, this is my priority for this year, to get this thing done before school opens.
I really do appreciate the dialogue. I think it's absolutely worthwhile because we as a board have to be all over this. I'm completely on board with the decision by staff to go in this direction.
Okay, with that.
Yeah, but I just wish we had some opportunity to have a dialogue about it before we're forced with a contract. I mean, this would have been a great conversation 8 weeks ago. Did anybody know we were going this particular direction in the contract?
No.
So just next time, it'd be, because it's almost already too late to sort of pivot, right? And so it's certainly be too late to pivot in a couple months. So next time, it'd be helpful to have this either heads up or request for direction on whether or not it's full and open or this type of vehicle. I don't want to call it less than full and open because it's still full and open. Anyway.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve that resolution.
I make a motion to approve Town of Superior Resolution Number R-13, Series 2020, a resolution of the Board of Trustees, Town of Superior approving an agreement with Goodland Construction Incorporated for pre-construction services for the 88th Street Improvement Project.
Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis, second by Trustee Lish. Roll call vote.
Lasis,
Yes.
Hammerling,
Yes.
Uzedius,
Yes.
Folsom,
Yes.
Skwarczynski,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Lish.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're now on to item number 5, which is public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving the Rock Creek Ranch filing number 20D, final plat site plan number 36, and a lease agreement for Verizon Wireless macro site at Community Park. Do we have proof of publication for the public hearing?
Yes, we do.
Okay, proof is verified. And with the gavel, we'll open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Last year, the board approved a master license agreement with Verizon to establish a process to install new facilities and upgrade facilities throughout town to improve cell coverage service to residents, the public, and businesses. Since that time, Verizon's been working with Xcel Energy to go through their permitting process for some of these facilities that are planned to be installed this year. And they also did an analysis of the coverage in town, and as part of that analysis, determined that a macro facility at Community Park would help to improve cell coverage service to the public and residents in town. Tonight, they will be presenting their application for a macro facility located at Community Park, as well as a lease agreement to establish that facility. Stephen Williams is here to answer any questions, and we have a number of Verizon reps. Thank you for coming tonight, also to answer any questions. Would you want to start with just a quick presentation from staff and Stephen, or do you want to start off with Verizon and their presentation? How would you like to proceed? It's a little different than the development application somewhat.
Sure, if the board have any preference on, I'm thinking have Verizon go
Okay.
first and then staff.
With that, we'll have you come on out.
Do you all have, we have circulated a presentation?
Yeah,
Oh,
included in the packet.
okay, got it. So could I move through that up here?
Yeah.
Got it.
If you could start with your name as part of your introduction, please. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening. Sorry. Good evening. My name is Andrew Cole. I work for the network team here in Colorado on behalf of Verizon. thank you all for having the opportunity to be here tonight. We're gonna, as mentioned, we have a group of us here tonight. Our goal is to walk through a little bit of information, but then we just want to make sure that we're available to answer any questions you all have. So, so we're just gonna talk briefly about what's going on in the wireless industry, and then we're going to explain specifically, as mentioned, what we hope to accomplish with this particular macro facility we're about here tonight. And then I understand there's been some questions about, as referenced, the small cell agreement that we came to. So I'll try to just explain briefly how those two interact. And again, we have our RF engineer here who can answer really more of the specific technical issues, but hope to give you all a general understanding of just overall our goals and what we're doing to invest in the community to serve our customers here. So just some trends in the wireless industry. We've got some data up here, and I'll quote it just to explain that data usage, there's really two things that people use their wireless devices for: to make phone calls, voice, and then data tasks. And we're seeing an increase in people using wireless in general. On the phone call side, 90+% of households have wireless. Over half are wireless only now is the source of their phone. So that's more of a linear increase in people, using wireless, and it's important in their lives. On the data side, we're really seeing an explosion, and it's more of it's more than a linear increase. So folks are really using their phone for more data tasks, and then people are attaching more devices to the network that are doing those data tasks. And then just as a reminder that it's extremely important for emergency services, more than 3/4 of 911 calls come from wireless. So it is certainly important to the communities we operate in. So as I mentioned, we have an image here that kind of describes that when we get too many folks trying to use the network, you kind of get clogged up. The other thing I like to use, the other analogy I like to use is lanes on a highway, or to draw the parallel with traffic. And we are continually looking to expand the lanes on our highways or building new highways to carry that data traffic that we're talking about. So I'm going to skip through this just to get more to the specifics of the plan. But this is just a reminder again that the ubiquitous nature of wireless in our industry, or in our society today, obviously key for emergency services. We're the reference to smart home and smart communities. Like I said, we're attaching more devices to the network that are more than just your phone. We've got all the wearables, all the things in your home, the things out in the community, and just a reminder as to how people are using it out on the go, and it's important both for entertainment but also for business, travel, get around, things like that. So as I referenced earlier, we're here tonight to specifically talk about a new macro facility that we'd like to build, but I want to just briefly describe where we're at and how small cells, as referenced earlier, fit in. So if you think about the history of the wireless industry, those macro facilities, which are essentially towers, large poles, are really how we have served customers over the years, and we've used frequencies and power levels on those macro facilities that extend great distances. Over time, we have filled in, over the last few years, we've started to fill in on those 4G frequencies with small cells that are really just kind of reusing and making efficient use of those similar frequencies on 4G networks. And so in that sense, those small cells really act like additional lanes, or maybe even more, to carry the analogy all the way through, they really act like on and off ramps. And so our macro facilities continue to provide the umbrella coverage that gives you the ability to connect to the network. And in general, small cells are going to fill in, sometimes we'll use them to fill in coverage areas in specific topographical environments, but for the most part, they're in areas where you would otherwise be able to connect to the network, but it gets congested and bogged down. And so there may be times when there's too many people using it. So as I mentioned, we're here tonight to talk about a macro that will provide a significant overall boost in coverage here in the town. And then we are working on some small cell projects. And I think the way we'd like to go about it is when Kevin, our RF engineer, comes up, he can kind of reference where they are, but because small cells are so localized and we don't have everything finalized for those just yet, we were hesitant to put them up on a map. Part of the way we'll deploy is on Excel assets, and we have an agreement with them, and so there are some things that we need to check off. So we weren't prepared to put them as dots on a map just yet, but Kevin can briefly describe kind of what those coverage objectives are. So next, I'm going to ask Kevin to come up. And then if you all have questions, certainly ask along the way, but be happy to answer them all sort of at the end as well. So next, I'm going to introduce Kevin, who's our RF engineer.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Kevin Brown. I'm an RF engineer out for the Denver office. I cover Superior as well as some other areas. And just kind of want to step through the coverage, and then I can also take questions on the small cells and some other things that we're working on. So this is, as of today, this is how the current coverage is in the town of Superior. So kind of the purple triangles are where we have existing sites. We actually had a macro come up late last year, so when we did planning commission, that wasn't represented in here, so we corrected that and actually added that in. And then the blue triangle kind of in the center here, right here, that's actually where the proposed site is actually going to be. So for the legend, basically there's three colors that we kind of distinguish for coverage. So green basically means great service, which means you have great coverage inside your house, on the street, in your car, those type of things. Yellow, probably great outside, great in your car, some coverage inside, but not everywhere. And then red is more marginal. Probably don't have good coverage inside your house. Probably have some coverage outside, but you might hit areas where if you're on a phone call, your audio will still go in and out a little bit, and you might have some slower data speeds. So this is the current coverage as it sits today, and then if we step through, once we turn the macro site in the blue, that area in the center that's in between kind of Rock Creek and McClaston and Colton kind of fills in really nicely. So I know there's some, I think we have some slides in here about, we got some comments back from Mayor Pro Tem when we had a meeting a little over a year ago about a survey that was sent out for some citizens for if they were Verizon customers, if they had some areas of bad coverage. We felt that the macro actually does satisfy and actually provides those citizens with coverage as well. And then some of the small cells that we're looking at, we're actually looking at something kind of right out here over near the marketplace. We're looking at another location kind of on 88th and Shamrock, kind of where those apartments are. Another one on Rock Creek in Indiana. And then something over kind of by McCaston and Christensen. Those are just some preliminary ones that we're looking at. We don't have confirmed locations yet, but once we get there, I'm sure we can come back and talk to you guys more if you guys have any questions on those as well.
So real quick before you move on from that, so basically the intent with the small cells, which are not reflected on this map right now, it would be to turn those yellow areas into green and leave Superior mostly, if not completely green, once all said and done?
For the most part, yes. So in some of those areas, yeah, we will fill in some of those red and those yellow areas to make them green. The only area that is already green right now that that's actually more needed for capacity is actually right out here. And the way, as Andrew mentioned, with capacity reasons, think of it if you're on your phone, you have full bars and your phone doesn't do anything. That's where we have some congestion at the site. So I noticed it when I was walking around the Costco over here where I was trying to watch a movie real quick just as a test. And I noticed I had some buffering there right around rush hour. Those small cells that we design, I like to use the analogy of it, they're like an island site. So they're for basically pockets of areas that have a lot of users all in one general place that don't really move around. So shopping areas are great. I know you have your new downtown area that you guys are currently in construction over here. That really isn't reflected here. I'm sure we will have to look at something there for the future. This was kind of a more of an intro thing just to kind of get the ball rolling to try to work through some of the designs with Superior and with Excel. But I'm sure we'll be looking at that as well once we see the usage there. I mean, I was at the sports stable last time we were up here, and I see how many people were over there. So we understand that there will definitely be a need there as well. But yes, to your point, yes, those small cells can also be designed for to fill in some coverage holes as well, just to make sure that those people have that reliable service inside their house and outside.
In looking at the coverage map that's proposed here, there's clearly still a big gap in South Rock Creek.
Yes.
And it sounds like none of the small cell facilities you're proposing are anywhere near that. So what is the plan to address the coverage in that southmost area?
So we would have to put, we're currently looking at doing a comprehensive plan for small cells, as well as looking to see if there's any other assets up in that area for possibly another macro installation. This was kind of just one site that we were looking at. I haven't done the analysis on the south area, but I agree with you. I think that area needs help as well.
Well, and I mean, I certainly understand that this is focused on the macro facility in Community Park.
Yep.
But in looking at the fact that there's 4 small cell facilities proposed, why are those all still focused more on the north side than on the south side?
Some of that was based off of the coverage maps, but some of that was also based off the comments that we got from the survey as well. I don't believe we had, did we?
So in South Rock Creek, no one's complaining about the service? Because that's where I'm hearing a lot of complaints as it being the worst.
If you don't mind, could I sync up with you afterwards? And
sure
we can
thing.
definitely
Yeah,
get some comments
absolutely.
out? Absolutely.
I mean, to me, that's really clear, even just looking at this, that there's still, that's pretty much the only spot that's red, and yet none of the small cells are going to address that.
Okay. I mean, this plan is kind of comprehensive, so it's not something that we just do and we're done and we walk away from it. This is constant reevaluating over and over again, so we can definitely look to partner with you guys on doing additional installations in that southern area.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would just question some of those 4 small cell facilities where they're in areas that are already very green on that map.
Yeah, originally, at least the marketplace one, that was my big pet peeve because I knew that we had major capacity issues, and then when we saw the downtown Superior site area going in, we really knew that we were going to be in a bind there sooner than later.
Okay.
Do individual businesses ever put small cell sites on their businesses? You mentioned shopping centers and places like the sports stable where you know there's going to be a large amount of people that are wanting to do things on their phones. Can businesses or even stadiums, for instance, put in devices kind of with your help, but kind of advancing things even quicker than maybe your small cell schedule?
Yes, yeah. So we have done installations with private landlords on buildings for macro and small cell facilities. You know, we've done those in multiple places, in Boulder and in Longmont, and I mean, kind of all over the state. So those are definitely opportunities as well.
And are those something that, I mean, does the business pay for that? How does that work?
We basically would have to enter kind of a lease agreement with the underlying landlord for those buildings. And honestly, when we had the opportunity to partner with Excel, one of the things that I've noticed is that because that agreement is more of a master lease agreement that allows us to kind of co-locate on assets that they approve. Once we get moving on that actually the timelines are cut down significantly because there's no back and forth with the landlord, right? There's no further any more negotiations. It's based off the criteria that was set forth in the master lease agreement.
But if a group like Sports Stable said, we really want to have a device here to make our building just super fast,
yeah.
Is there a cost to them, or if they just agree to do it, is it something that Verizon would install at Verizon's cost?
We would install it at our cost, and we would have to work with them obviously on the lease and everything. But yeah, that's something that we could actually look into.
Okay. All right.
So far, lots of questions around the small cell, but the application today is on the macro.
That's
so, what was your predecessor's name? Not the RF engineer, but we had a woman who came to us a few times.
Oh, Debbie Essert?
Debbie.
Yes.
Okay. So expect to see her this evening. I hope she's well.
She actually got a promotion.
Oh, good for her. Well deserved. So so I rewatched, she'd come to the town at least 3 times that I remember, so I watched all those videos. And it was all about the small cell facilities. And with a couple of very small exceptions, there was not much of a reference to a macro facility. Just, her making general comments that macro facilities are generally not within residential areas. So I frankly, and our town manager sends us memos regularly every Friday. And it was referenced, the macro tower was referenced a handful of times, but I think I maybe missed the importance of where this was going. So help me educate me a little bit around, you have a bullet, and maybe it's around, maybe I've skipped ahead, but kind of why we need the macro facility right there, and why that macro facility would not be better in a more commercial zone away from homes. Because and I'm certainly no RF engineer, but it seems like it's really close to homes, and not very many homes, and there really are no homes west of us. Why wouldn't this macro facility, could the macro facility be a bit further east, either in Superior or in Broomfield, and still meet the same requirements? I don't want to talk about the micro small cell. I want to understand kind of the location of the macro facility and why it needs to be so close to our homes, right in the middle of a community park, next to restaurants, and literally kind of the human center of our town.
Okay. Do you want to take on the site selection? So I will say we couldn't go to the east because we actually have a site that's actually at the Flatirons Mall, and the cell sites work together, but when they get too close together, then we start to have major problems with interference, which almost makes the signal unusable. So that's where you...
Tell me about the site at the Flatirons Mall. How tall is that?
About 75 feet, I believe. It's kind of in a fake cupola at the near the Nordstroms, I believe.
I don't know what a cupola means.
Kind of like a fake, you see them in churches all the time, kind of like something with louvers and stuff in there.
Okay. So would that, if that was enhanced from 75 feet to 100 feet that's proposed today, would that resolve some of the need?
I mean, you'll definitely get some other some coverage issues from that, but then we have the same concerns with capacity, because that site's actually being overdriven just based off of all the traffic at the mall. So the two sites the site that serves most of the east side of town for Superior either comes from that site or the site to the north there, which is across 36 at one of the hospitals. Those are the two sites that basically serve most of the town of Superior. And unfortunately, both of those sites are incredibly overdriven with traffic right now.
Okay.
So with the site selection, I'm going to actually turn it over to our site acquisition person, Beth Hickey. I'll be around to answer any other questions.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Beth. I work with the real estate department at Verizon, helping to site locations and determine the best areas for a macro site such as this. I'm going to move us to this slide. As had been discussed, this relationship actually started with the town of Superior reaching out to Verizon and other carriers because of concerns from citizens about their coverage. And this conversation did begin with small cells. As the parties were getting together, the need became apparent, or the likelihood that a macro site in this general area where the community park is would be a good site to be able to take off a lot of the traffic that the small cells just can't intend to with that kind of capacity. And so the discussion then eats away from small cells into this macro facility, and where we could put a macro facility that would be in a central part where the population does need it most, and also on town-owned facilities. And so that is where, between the two parties, we started discussing town-owned property and what would work, and that's how we fell onto this particular location at the community park. One of the reasons I think that's critical to bring up that this particular location was chosen is because at Community Park, there are already, 81-foot light poles. There's already vertical structures up there. By being able to put the antennas at the top of that, we're not having to erect something new and create another visual on the horizon. We've already got something that's existing, that we can attach to, so it minimizes some of the aesthetic. This particular view, if you look over here, this is where we took the picture from. So you brought up something about the residential, and I'm glad you did. This location, we are, I believe, 350 feet from the closest intersection, or the closest sidewalk, which is down here. We're approximately 500 feet from any residential. So we did take into account, and it was a major topic, how we could place something that's centrally located to be able to, where the greatest amount of people would have the benefit, but also not detract from the aesthetic values of the town of Superior, including the park, and from the residential, the residences, the private residences around it. So this gives you an example. If you're in the right field, this is what we're looking at here. Right here is our pole. This is what it will look like once the antennas get on top of it. This is taken from Colton Road. So you'll see this is our pole right here. So this is what you'll be looking at once those antennas are attached. This is from the concession area, from the berm up here to from like the south of it or so. You're looking a little bit east. This is along the first baseline here. And this is the enclosure that's up on behind the concession stand, a wooden slatted fence, 8 feet tall, that will hide all the equipment and be out of the way, because obviously we understand there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot going on at the park, and this will keep it out of where the public will be going. The field is over here. So this was the best location we felt for the equipment. Something to keep in mind, we had several site walks with members of the town, as well as Verizon Construction, Engineering, Architecture and Engineering. We did have the Parks Department at the site walk to help us to find locations for this that would work best. So the least obtrusive to the use of the park, as well as obviously the aesthetics there. So this gives you an idea. And again, here we are. This is our pole right here. And this is what you're looking at today. And this is coming from up north, further out past the outfield. And we do, this right here is the Coal Creek Regional Trail. This picture was taken from so I'm back here. So if you're a resident, your houses are back here. So we got a little bit closer, but here's our current pole. And this is what you'd be looking at. So we really did our best with the town, walking around the property to figure out how are we going to keep the impact low for those people who do own property around this area. But also, obviously, you make a good point. There's restaurants, there's homes, there's a lot of traffic. We did want to be able to alleviate that and enhance what the small cells are going to be able to do in the future. Do you have any questions about that before I move on from some of these sims?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question of you, but also a question of the town manager. You talked about the houses that were to the north of the park, but what about the houses to the south in the summit at Rock Creek? We see where that loop right goes around there, all those townhouses there. Did you go and look at that? And my other question is to the town manager. Did we in any way communicate with the residents around the park and let them know that this was coming?
We sent 279 letters out to residents within the area about the application.
Okay, the reason I asked that is I haven't spoken to a single resident of the summit at Rock Creek who got it. So now I haven't talked to all of them, but I know many of them didn't get it. And so I don't know whether it came over the holiday season, but most of them many people in the summit are not aware of this. And when they found out, they were a bit surprised, to say the least. So they're concerned about what they're going to see out their back door. So that's just for what it's worth.
One of the things that I just wanted to add, so I was involved in the meeting with Assistant Town Manager Martin Toth, and we met with Kevin, and Debbie was there, as well as other members at Verizon. After we had entered into the master lease agreement with Verizon with respect to the small cells, we had this discussion about where the small cells would actually work in the town of Superior. One of the challenges that was brought to our attention at that meeting with Verizon representatives is Verizon already has this master agreement with Xcel, so they can install their small cells on Xcel's existing infrastructure. However, it depends on what that existing infrastructure is. And one of the unique things that we have here in Superior are these ornamental light posts all throughout our community, right? And these are things that were installed when Rock Creek was built. And we have, if you go down Rock Creek Parkway and you go down Colton Road, we've got the turquoise painted, ornamental lampposts that, aren't what Xcel is putting in every neighborhood. And they're not the types of things that easily could take a small cell facility. Similarly, the lampposts that are in most of the residential areas are not of the height that the small cells would need to be effectively deployed. So it became kind of quick. We realized that to actually install small cells everywhere in town where they were needed to address the coverage issues would either require removing a lot of existing lamps and putting in taller ones that don't necessarily fit the aesthetic of the existing community, or installing new poles, throughout the community. And so, we're trying to reconcile, is there another way to address the coverage issues? Because people were also concerned about having small cells deployed, right next to their homes. And there was definitely, I think, concerns when we entered into that master lease agreement with, or master license agreement about, deploying small cells all over the community. So we started talking about, is there a possibility that there could be a macro facility that could really take care of most of the problem without the need of deploying, 60 small cells throughout Superior?
One additional question. You referenced the distances from residents to this pole. Do you have other macro facilities that are closer? I mean, what's the standard? Is there any distance where there starts to be any concerns for safety or health risks or anything of that nature?
There are. Kevin, you could probably speak to that a little bit better.
So can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
First we'll start with what's kind of the standard distance from homes for macro facilities? Do you have macro facilities that are closer to homes than what's being proposed here? And how close can you get to homes before you start to have any health and safety concerns?
So first question, to answer your first question, yes, we do have sites that are definitely closer than 500 feet to homes. Just thinking in downtown Denver, where I have sites on apartment complexes that are on, right near town, right near residences, yes, we do. From a emission standpoint and health, we are basically, we have to stay within, we're governed by the FCC, so we have to make sure that we stay within those limits. In my career, I've seen where the really being within where the most RF energy and the emissions are created are basically directly in front of the antenna within a few feet from there. And then once you come off, once you're outside of those few feet, it starts to drop off exponentially by factors of 100 or 1,000. So when we talk about emission levels, when you're at this distance, your emission levels inside of a home that's 500 feet away is probably on par with something similar like your Wi-Fi router inside your house.
So when you say within a few feet, are you talking about like the entire pole or just the top?
No, just the top of the antenna, right in front of the antennas.
Okay, so even somebody who's playing baseball directly under the lights still.
Yeah, you're probably within 1 to 5% of the FCC allowable limits out of 100 at those levels, being on the ground versus being up at the top near the antennas.
Does the antenna make any noise?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So a quick question I have for you. You mentioned that you didn't want to put it any further toward Flatirons Mall because it could cause interference with the signals.
Correct. So
okay.
Yeah.
So now, is that only an issue if it's another Verizon tower? Suppose one of your competitors came in and wanted to do the same thing. Does this now preclude any other AT&T or T-Mobile or anybody? Is it strictly interference with your own signals or with anybody else's signals?
Yeah, correct. So so the frequency bands that we use, that we get from the FCC, those are specific to us. We pay the license fees for those. If AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, any other carrier that comes, as long as they're using their FCC license frequency.
Okay, so they
won't cause any problems.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question back to the noise question that Ken had asked. Not so much with the antenna, but with the equipment cabinet. What kind of energy draw are we talking about? And then what's the level of dB noise that we're talking about for the cabinet?
I'm not sure. We have Mark Wilson. He's actually our construction engineer. And I think he actually, you know the decibel levels for everything? If you don't mind.
So I'm Mark Wilson. I oversee the construction of the actual site. And so there's 2 cabinets inside of the compound that was shown. Let's see. So inside where it's fenced right there, we have 2 cabinets. They're about the size of refrigerators. They're about 6 feet tall. So we decided to put an 8-foot fence over it to help protect, and you can't see them. They do have 2 small air conditioners on them. They're about 2 tons each, and they run
24/7.
No, they don't. They run when needed.
Okay.
When there's heat needing to come out. So the one cabinet has batteries in it, which they don't really put off heat. It's more of an air exchanger. The other one runs sometimes in the winter when the cabinet needs to be heated up, and then other times during the summer. However, with the fence around it, you can't really hear them at all. And then they run intermittently, and they have fans as well. So it'll take outside air in as long as it can until the outside air is too warm, and then it'll kick in the compressor. So usually at full power, they run about 20 dB.
Okay.
So with the street right there, I don't think you'd even notice, and the fence around it, because it's going to help block that sound in.
Well, it is on this. Well, I think it's on the north side of the ditch, right? So we do movies in the park and stuff like that. A lot of people sit on the hill, so that's my concern. But there's not a roof on this thing, is there? It's just a fenced on the outside, and it's open.
It is open upward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then power draw. Did you want?
Yeah.
So we get a 200 amp service from Excel.
Okay.
That's the smallest commercial they'll drop for us. We only use about 68 amps.
Okay.
It's pretty low power. Yep. Most of the power comes out of the radios that are with the antennas.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next slide I wanted to show you to go through is the layout of the site and some of the things you will and won't see. Here is the actual antennas on that light post. This right here is our equipment cabinet with the equipment that Mark was just talking about. Right here is where we have an Excel transformer, and so we have a utility easement right here that connects us to Excel to our equipment. From there, we have another...
I'm sorry, so, and just to clarify, it's actually a utility license.
License, excuse me.
All the easements that are in the licenses, just for clarification.
So Excel, we have our utility license here that will connect us with our power to the equipment cabinet. From here, we have and this is underground, just mind you.
I'm actually going to ask another almost legal type question. There's a footer here that's just really bothering me. Confidential proprietary materials authorized Verizon personnel outside agencies only. That's a legacy footer that does not apply to anything that's being presented here, correct?
Yes, yes, everything that's being presented in a public hearing we know is public record.
Thank you.
Oh, at the bottom of the drawings, okay. Okay, so here's our equipment. We have another utility license that will connect between the equipment out to the light standard right here. And this is where we'll have power and fiber will both run through here. Our next license, this right here is the sidewalk. So this is our access, our legal access to get onto the property, bringing us all the way from where the parking lot is. Right here, this yellow line, this is another utility license. There's a fiber handhold right here. So we'll be boring fiber underneath, cruising up here to meet up with the access easement, or excuse me, access license. Again, everything underground to be bored. It will connect and run underneath this sidewalk, marrying up with the power to then go out to the site. And just to note, as I said before, but it was, we were, when we first got together with the town of Superior and went out to the site, the Parks Department was there, and this was determined to be the best option for all of the utilities and easement to create the least amount of disruption and keep our access as direct as possible. All of the conditions, as the park stands today, everything will be returned back to that condition post-construction. And this just gives you some perspective. Here's our light standard right here with the antennas, and over here is where our equipment is. Again, we have a photo sim to kind of show you what those distances are and what you'll be looking at. Tree heights here, so you get an idea of heights and general aesthetics. Again, the elevations just gives you an idea of kind of our height differences. This is as it stands today. These will be the antennas as we attach it. This is an existing garbage can, just to give you some perspective. Our equipment cabinet right here will be on a bit of a riser because of the berm right here. And then the equipment cabinets, we did place this around these trees for a specific reason, to help shield the location from view with existing vegetation. And this just goes through that, we obviously worked with the town and ensured that the property that we're putting this site on complies with all of the ordinances, and that Verizon is overseen by the FCC, the FAA, all of the local and state building codes, as well as NEPA, SHPO, and tribal agreements. So if there's any questions I can answer about the siting or the location or design of the site, I'm happy to do that. Or anything else?
Just a quick question. There was a reference earlier about an existing macro site that came online late last year. Where was that located?
So this site down near, I guess, level 3.
Okay.
We had a site that had been in the works for years that had some issues getting connectivity, and it just went on air right at the tail end of last year. It was right as soon as I put together the presentation for Planning Commission, that site went on air. And I was too late.
No, I just heard anecdotally, people in southern, the southern part of the town have said something different. They've noticed that the service that they're getting is actually better.
That would make sense.
So I actually got a compliment. They said, "Oh, it's great that the town actually did something to improve the Verizon service." And I said, "Well, we actually haven't had the public hearing yet, so we can't talk about that. But
yeah,
hold your horses."
Yeah, and yeah, it was a pretty short site that we did there. Unfortunately, because of where it sits kind of at a really high point. And I really couldn't point back anything back into the town, because then, from that elevation, I could actually see all the way into Boulder. And once there is such a thing as the site being too tall in certain locations.
Okay, thank you. Does the town staff have anything to add?
Nope, not unless there's questions. I will say that the Planning Commission at their meeting, I think it was unanimous to recommend approval of the site.
Yes. Okay.
I've got another question, just back to the cabinet again. On the schematics, it says basically there's the two cabinets in the fencing area, and there's 2 more for future expansion. What drives that expansion? In terms of obviously, are you going to add more antennas to the array? What are you going to need more of in the cabinet or in the fenced-in area?
You probably know more about the expansion for batteries and stuff more than I do.
Yeah. So we're trying to future-proof our sites to have expansion. And basically, as we have a battery and an equipment cabinet, we have 2 more slots for 2 more of those. So we'd have a second set of batteries and a second equipment cabinet. The thought on most of it is if we have to bring small cells in the area back to that site, we could home all of the small cells and where they come back to at that certain site, and there would be enough room for it. So,
So one thing that we can never really foresee is we can only deal with what we have with the knowledge that we have right now. So we don't know what frequency bands the FCC is going to auction off in the near future. We don't know what's coming down the path 5 years from now. So that instead of us trying to come back in front of you to try to do a land expansion to try to grab that space, that's the reason that we try to have additional cabinets. As Mark mentioned, one of the big things that we're trying to do with our network is we try to cut down latency. And one of the things to cut down latency is if your brains of everything is in one, cuts down time to have to go all the way back to a switching center where it can be switched right out of there. So if your small cells are all coming back there and they're all kind of talking together with the macro site, it cuts down on your latency, which means it's a better service for the customer.
No, I really appreciate this discussion because it wasn't clear in any of the materials that fenced-in area is scalable to future expansion in other sort of, I guess, network architecture, for lack of a better term. I mean, there's obviously the macro cell. It's going to use half the space. The other half could get used by any number of microcells over time.
Yeah.
Right. So the noise level, the number of air conditioner units, the power draw may change.
It could, absolutely. If we have to add more, then obviously your power will obviously go up. But I will say that the equipment from 2G, 3G to now has become incredibly more efficient from a power standpoint.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay,
I've got a question probably for whoever can answer it. How was the lease amount of $14,400 determined?
Sure. That's market rent. Verizon as a whole has an idea of each area and what kind of rent drives that area. And so that was the proposal to the town and was accepted.
Okay. And I'll just say we receive information from other cities as far as their lease agreements that they do, not only with Verizon, but other carriers. And I would agree with that statement.
Perfect. And then it's already been touched on once, but because there is inconsistencies in what was provided in our board packet, just wanted to be clear. So the zoning narrative that was provided by the company stated that an easement is requested to provide access and utilities to the pole and equipment. We've heard tonight, and also in the land lease agreement itself, it states that this will be done through lease, no, not easements. Can we just get, for the record, confirmation that that's true?
Yes, that's true.
Fantastic.
And that's consistent within the lease itself.
Okay, thank you. All right, does the board have any other questions of staff of the applicant before we move on to opportunity for public comment and then ultimately close the public hearing, and then we'll have discussion and action?
I've got another question for staff, and I'd sent this one to Stephen and to Martin. I mean, really, my question here, and I don't want to close the public hearing, and this is less to Verizon. I appreciate Verizon being the first here, but they're not the only carrier. We've got 3 other carriers right now. Maybe it goes to 2, and then Dish puts something together, and there's a 4th carrier. Who knows what comes down the path? What Verizon is setting in place here, it's going to become the template for others. So everything that they've done in terms of sort of finding the optimum position and spot. We don't. If T-Mobile comes in here and says, hey, we're going to put this over here, and we're going to put the equipment cabinet over here, and it's closer to everybody, we've got to be comfortable with that. And staff, rightfully didn't try to future-proof and try to co-locate all these cabinets, but I'm not sure how we deal with that in the future. I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed we don't have anything in place right now with the next carrier that may or may not show up here.
And just for the record, and this is really getting into discussion, but the town did reach out to all the major carriers before this, and Verizon was the only carrier that actually responded and answered the call. So, I mean, I hear your concern, and I share that concern, but at the same time, we can only do what we can do, and if only one carrier actually responds and, wants to partner with the town and work with us, we have to take the hand that we're dealt.
Yeah,
but we can't ignore the future. I mean, we cannot ignore the fact that other carriers may well, there's some things coming down the pike with AT&T that I believe this is going to become more important for them also. So we have to be prepared for what will happen if AT&T or T-Mobile or Sprint or whoever comes in. And we've got to be able to, we can't say no to them just because somebody else is there.
I agree with that, but I also, on the flip side of that, I don't think we can say no to Verizon when AT&T hasn't come out with anything.
Yeah, I'm not, at no point am I saying no to Verizon. I actually appreciate everything that Verizon has done. I just want this board and this town to be ready that the next tower and location of the cabinet may not be as optimal as this.
Yeah.
I mean, let's get that clear with ourselves right now.
Totally agree, but that's where I'd rather evaluate each application on its merits as far as location. You know, if Verizon is getting and I don't know, but if they're getting the best location by getting in earlier, that's their prerogative. They're the only ones who agreed to work with us on that, and they should get the best location as a result.
So, question for town staff and Verizon. During the conversations leading up to this, was there any discussion of co-locating the cabinets if other carriers were to come forward? Is that something that occurs ever, so we can build a bigger space? That way we don't end up with 3 or 4 different boxes of wooden fenced areas?
The pole, the light that the pole is on,
right,
those can be co-locatable. The equipment space typically is not shared. Verizon did not lease enough space in this application to allow for any other providers to come in and share that space. So they will have to lease their ground space from the town of Superior if they choose to go in the same location.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, this opportunity, I'd like to give the opportunity for anyone in the public, make public comment on this agenda item before we close the public hearing. Any public comment? All right, seeing none. Anything final before we close the public hearing? Any final questions of staff or applicant? Okay, with the gavel, the public hearing's closed, and we'll have discussion and then action.
I'll go first. So I want to thank Verizon, Kevin, Andrew, Beth, Debbie's obviously not here, but she was here multiple occasions meeting with us, helping really address a concern that was probably the most widely pronounced concern that I heard from residents, since I was elected back in 2016 was, why is cell phone, and this isn't just unique to Verizon, but why is cell phone coverage such a problem in Superior? And then I go over to Boulder, I go over to Louisville, I go over to Broomfield, and I don't have any problems. And this is one of those frustrating types of problems to deal with as an elected official because, we don't actually provide cell phone service, and we don't have the ability to just snap our fingers and make the problem go away. All that we can do as elected officials here is work with our town staff, try to reach out to the major carriers to see if there's something that can be done to address this problem. And I want to give town staff, Matt, Martin, Stephen, credit for working with Verizon, working also with the other carriers and inviting them to actually propose a solution here in Superior. Only Verizon answered that call. And this discussion really started back when we were talking about small cells, and we did a crowdsourced survey to identify okay, tell us where you're having these problem areas. And we have a really active and engaged public, and they volunteered information with intersections where there were problem coverage areas. We gave that information to Verizon, and you used it. And I want to thank you for doing that, and also doing the due diligence that you did to actually figure out where the best place to locate a macro facility is. I think that there was significant concern for not locating this in an area that was too close to residences. So I'm comfortable that the distance between where this site is going to be installed is sufficiently far enough away from all the residences, so we're not going to have concerns. I also appreciate the fact that we're not installing a new pole, and we're actually able to take advantage of the fact that there's an existing light pole over there already. I was walking around Community Park recently, and nobody ever really looks up. Once the pole is there, it just becomes something that you're used to. And I don't think people are going to notice it maybe the first time that they're there, but what they're really going to notice is that they actually have cell phone reception in Superior that they currently don't have. So I don't have any concerns with the current application. I appreciate understanding where the small cells could be. My one ask for Verizon is that when you actually identify specifically, where those are going to be, that you share them with the town so we can communicate that to the public, just so people can know. I think to Trustee Skrzynski's point, that area in southern Rock Creek definitely needs some attention too. So I hope that this is an iterative, process and a conversation with the town once the macro facility is up and running. See what that does of resolving the problems. If there are still coverage areas, then obviously let's look to installing the small cells where they need to go to really solve all the problems. What we don't want to have happen here is address 90% of the need and leave some residents out. So hopefully we can address all of the coverage issues. But thank you very much for taking the time and effort to come here and solve this problem for Superior. Appreciate it.
So we have a public hearing tonight to talk about the macro facility, and I suspect 60+% of what we've talked about is the small cell and coverage instead of what we should be talking about, which is bringing a macro facility into our community. I'm sure Verizon's familiar with, hopefully you saw the minutes or maybe even saw the video, and so you know how I feel. I've got a number of comments, but I'll start with I'm not supportive of this in the least for a number of reasons. We've invited in the 300-pound gorilla, in this case, the multi-billion-dollar 300-pound gorilla. It started with a very pleasant conversation around, hey, we're a small town and we've got a problem with, we have a number of users that are Verizon customers and we have some coverage issues. Can you help? And it started with, sure, there's small cell technology and we can hang them on your light poles. And we're willing to share the vertical asset that you have today, which is a light pole, and we'll be able to leverage that. And then that changed. So, well, wait a minute, your vertical assets aren't going to work for us, for the small cell, because they're too decorative, they've got curves, they're not high enough, they're too low, they're too high. So we need to create our own vertical assets for small cell. Okay, but we could still share, right? Nope, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to share those vertical assets. Now, consistent conversations around small cell technologies have changed into this ginormous macro facility. It's still, I know this is what's easy and what is requested by Verizon, but I don't think it should be at the quality of life for the residents of Superior. It may improve some of the residents that are Verizon customers, but for that person that's not a Verizon customer, who lives around the corner, who's going to look at this every day, it doesn't improve their quality of life. It hurts their quality of life. I fundamentally disagree that taking a 80-foot post vertical asset and replacing it with a 100-foot vertical asset is aesthetically identical. It's a funny moment in the beginning of the meeting. It's a 25% increase. Funny moment in the beginning of the meeting where Laura and I stood next to each other. We are 25, there's roughly a 25% height difference between the two of us. Aesthetically, we are very dissimilar. We do not look the same. You're replacing a 80-foot vertical asset with a 100-foot vertical asset and hanging a ton of stuff on that. We have not notified the community accordingly. I don't know a single person that received the letter. I'm sure they did, but if Matt says we sent them out, I'm sure they did, but this is completely, in my view, premature. Perhaps there's a place and a time to do this, but this is not the place and the time. I appreciate you coming. I know there's we like to say that we invited all the telecommunication companies to come out and help solve the problem. It's not like this was a formal invitation. Further, I'm very concerned of the next 100-foot pole that's going to be in our community without
proper planning. I'm not trying to prevent Verizon from providing the necessary coverage or improving your business. At this point, it would be premature for me, and I believe everybody on this board, to approve this macro facility. I think there are other ways to solve this problem. And if this is the only way to solve the problem, let's take some time, let's notify the community, let's plan for the future, and let's do this right. But this is the first time a public meeting has been had where we've even publicly discussed a macro facility. Again, the only time that a macro facility was discussed in this town were in memos from the town manager to this board, which are publicly available so anybody could read, but I don't think anybody does besides us, and your predecessor on 2 or 3 occasions when she mentioned the macro facility. And every time she mentioned them, she said, you do not usually see them in a residential area, which left me with the impression we would never see a macro facility in this highly dense residential area. Please, let's send Verizon home tonight. Do not approve this.
Okay, Laura.
So Kevin, I have to disagree with you a little bit in terms of, I think this is the first meeting where we've discussed the macro facility. But I think we've put out quite a bit of notice to residents in terms of our meetings are publicized, our agendas are publicized. Ken has done a fantastic job of trying to get the word out. For this meeting in particular, you know, he sent emails to the CAC list, to Facebook, et cetera, saying, hey, everyone, listen up. Verizon wireless macro site is going to be discussed on Monday. So I kind of see it as we've put the notice out there. We've done our best to let people know. We didn't hear objections to it. As much as I laugh at your great analogy about we're a 25% difference in height, I think there's a big difference when you're talking about heights that are still within your viewpoint versus something that's way up there. And, you know, I think about when I moved here from New York. When I'm in New York and I'm seeing an 80-story building and a 100-story building, they look the same from on the ground, even though there is a big difference there. Well, that's 20%, but still. So I know
you love, is it all right if we have a dialogue?
Yes, please.
So you know when you're in New York and you're driving up the Hutch and you see that macro facility that it pretends like it's a tree, yet it's smaller, yet it's larger than every other tree? You know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to have that in our community.
I don't know. I think we might just disagree on this visually. When I look at what's proposed, I agree with Mark. I don't think most people are looking up and saying, you know, oh, look at that. They see their viewpoint goes kind of like the plane we always talk about with downtown Superior. And I think most people aren't seeing what's at the top of that versus an 80-foot pole. So I guess in summary, although I'd invite anyone else to dialogue with me on this as well, and I appreciate that, I'm really supportive of this. I mean, I think we've reached out to all the carriers. Verizon's the only one who's come forth with a solution, and we've had our residents clamoring for this for just years at this point. I think we owe it to our residents to do something about this, not just say we've got to wait for other carriers to get in on it too.
Ken?
So I'm probably going to disagree again with most of what Trustee Ryan said. Asking questions of Verizon here tonight, the distance from the residents is safe and not even within the near bound of what they've normally done or what they have done. I asked about any type of audio pollution that could occur, and there's none from the pole, and what comes from the boxes will either be drowned out or mostly covered up by the fencing. As far as safety goes, again, hearing from Verizon, who has the expert engineers here tonight, we're not looking at safety risks from any radio signals coming through it. I frankly think that this is probably one of the best locations we could have found in Superior. It's central to most of Superior. It's adding on to a pole that's already in existence. And I'll follow on Mayor Pro Tem Lasis and Trustee Skuzinski's points that I think there's relativity here. looking at you two next to each other, yes. But when you get to be that tall, I think a 25% increase is less noticeable. From a communication perspective, as was mentioned, I put this out to our community listserv. I put it out to our Facebook groups, and I put it out to Nextdoor. I received almost no feedback. The small feedback that I did receive, none of it was negative. And using the exact same mechanisms for our last meeting about goats, I probably received 20 to 30 times the comments or feedback. I firmly believe that if we had a large uprising of residents that did not feel comfortable with this, we would have heard that through these mechanisms. I am supportive of this, and I encourage staff to continue to reach out to the other carriers. I'd like to see more parity here in Superior. The only ask for Verizon that I would have to tack on to the Mayor Pro Tem is not only come back to us with where the small cells will be, but also the timing for when they'll be activated, because that is of great interest to a lot of people I've talked to.
Neil, Sandy.
Look, so for me, this is a Gordian knot of complexity. We have a community, at least a Verizon user community, that's clamoring for better coverage, and we have a topology challenge. I mean, the bowl is the bowl, and trying to get data signals into the bowl is difficult. Verizon has definitely responded with one of the easiest technical solutions, a big macro facilities plopped down in the center. I'm just disappointed that more time doesn't look like it was spent looking at some of the other vertical assets, whether it was a fire station, a water treatment facility, the office space at the top of McCaslin. Nevertheless, they came forward and they've come up with a proposal that we can choose to accept. I appreciate the fact that, we expressed, to AT&T and Sprint and T-Mobile, and none of them responded. But, quite honestly, I've had T-Mobile and Sprint for the last 3 years. I don't have an issue. They're not responding because they're not having the same kinds of issues. So they will. And when they come back, and if we greenlight this today, this macro facility in the ball field, and when T-Mobile customers and Sprint merge and they start merging their assets, and we suddenly need more capacity, where are they going to put it? They're going to put it somewhere else in the ball field. And all of a sudden, we're going to have residents say, hey, you guys said it was 1. Why is there 4 of these here now? I mean, this is it. Like, if we do this today, we don't get to stop the next one and say, well, you didn't respond when we asked you to, so you got to find somewhere else. I really do appreciate everything that Kevin brought up. I mean, this started off as a way to, how do you solve a solution with a technically less obtrusive option? Microcells are a great way to do that. You're seeing more more creative solutions elsewhere. This is, I really mean no offense. I mean, this is just an ugly eyesore. I mean, you guys have done a great job with disguising the assets in so many other places. This might be the best way to do it with 1 tower as opposed to like 30 of them scattered around town, and I don't disagree that that's probably a better financial solution. I wish we could have seen a more creative solution, because this is, to me, it's, Verizon, again, we got to look at the application as what it is, but going forward, this is the first of many.
Can I just respond briefly to that? So one thing that has been said now by a couple of people on the board here, which the idea that this is somehow setting a precedent for things that are going to happen in the future, it is totally improper for us, in my opinion, on a land use application like this. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding here. This would be like if we were considering a development application, we're going to say, what, I'm not going to approve these 100 homes because 400 homes may come in the future. Totally improper. We would never do that in a land use application. We know better. We can't say, and we absolutely can, in a future application, if somebody wants to locate an array on a piece of town property, for us to say no. We don't have to enter into a lease with them. We don't have to approve it. So this is not going to set any sort of slippery slope precedent. This is an independent application that needs to be considered on its merits. It either passes or it fails. But the idea that this is all of a sudden going to turn, Community Park into, a vast network of mobile towers is, I think, number one, just not a proper basis for us to be considering the merits of this application. And 2 is just factually not correct.
Okay. But if you
just follow that analogy, it almost is correct, right? If this was a community, and, rolling back the clock 35 years before Rock Creek was planned, if there was somebody that had hey, I'm going to plop down, these 30 homes, but not lay out a master plan community and think about where I'm going to go to the wastewater treatment plant, or how I'm going to exit out the 36 or back to McCaslin, or what kind of schools, it would have been, of course, denied. It would have gone back to some type of master plan. And I think, while, yes, we are, of course, evaluating this application on its own, but there's absolutely nothing that would prohibit this board from saying, great application, but we want to step back and create a master plan for all things telecommunication, to think about where we want these. Maybe we do want to encourage people to come on and build in the wastewater treatment plant. Maybe we do want to come on and have people build something up the hill. So yes, we are evaluating this independently. And I never use the word precedent or suggest that it would be setting the precedent. But I do think it is wholly appropriate to think about the future. And is there a master telecommunication plan, or just vertical asset plan for what we want? Our town code says the vertical asset shouldn't be more than 40 feet high. Even if this was replacing one light pole for another, and by the way, we're not building on the existing light pole. They're going to tear down the light pole and build a new one that's 20 feet higher, 25% higher. So, but I'm sure it'll be fatter too, because it's got to be, right? So, and it's going to have heavier stuff hanging off it. But yeah, we of course could step back and consider that master plan for vertical assets. And I'm suggesting we should.
Okay, Sandy.
I appreciate the work that Verizon has done, and I believe we're making a response to a need that has been voiced by many residents in our community. However, we don't really know whether this is actually because Verizon didn't have sufficient equipment from the get-go and the other companies did. All we know is that at a point in time right now, Verizon doesn't have sufficient coverage. A year ago, almost a year ago to the day, we heard we were probably going to see 35 to 36 small cell towers in this community, and it was going to solve the problem. At that time, I expressed concern about those small cell towers, but it appeared to be the least obtrusive way to solve this problem. I concur 100% with Trustee Ryan that if we're going to go this route, I want us to have a plan for how we're going to go the next step, how we're going to deal as a town with this more obtrusive kind of technology, how we're going to be changing the existing landscape of our town. I certainly recognize that the six of you believe that this is the best place in town. It also happens to be that none of you will look on these polls. So of course it's the best to you. It may not be the best solution for the people who live around that. I think we have to plan for the future, because it is quite likely that AT&T and T-Mobile and Sprint will need this, particularly if we get to the point where none of us have landlines anymore, and all of us are depending on our cell carriers to provide our 911 service, where more and more things are coming through cell service. The fact that we are not, as a town, planning for how do we solve this problem going forward is short-sighted. And as from that perspective, I am not prepared to move forward with approving this. I approve the small towers, but this is not the direction I want to see us to go without more planning.
Okay, thanks, Andy. All right, I'll conclude with my comments and say that I am enthusiastically in support of this moving forward. I've heard loud and clear during my years as mayor that this is a significant problem. The number of mobile devices in our community has expanded exponentially, and coverage has struggle to keep up as we keep adding devices and our kids keep adding devices and we keep pumping more things across those devices. And that's not going to change. And it's hard for us in a planning role. I agree, plans would be great, but we've got a service that is provided by private companies that we don't control. So we depend on these partnerships like Verizon is doing with us. And I want to thank Mark for your initiative to survey the community, to get the feedback, and then to get the players at the table and our town staff for working with Verizon. I think this is a great story. I think why we haven't heard anything from the community is that they're saying, finally, you guys are doing something. You know, we hear stories about how service is bad because we're not doing anything. What do you think the story would be tonight if we vote this down? I think we would be run over with negative comments that, what are you doing? You finally have a plan to improve service in our town and you vote it down. So I will happily be the deciding vote, if you want to call it that, even though we don't have that, but I'm enthusiastically in support of this and appreciate all the time and work that's gone into this. So with that, I'll entertain them.
I'll make a motion to approve Town of Superior Resolution number R-14, Series 2020, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving the Rock Creek Ranch filing number 20D, final plat, site plan number 36, case number FPSP 2020-01, and associated land lease agreement.
All right, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lasis and second by Trustee Skrzynski. All those in favor? Lish, Skrzynski, Folsom, Lasis. Opposed? Ryan, Shaw, and Hammerly. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are now on to item number 7, which is update on 1500 Colton Road, building community engagement.
Thanks, Mayor. Leslie Clark and Kevin Colon are here from our Parks and Recreation Department, as well as our facilitator downtown Colorado that we've hired to help us with the public engagement process for the 1500 Colton Road building. And Leslie, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce our consultants from Downtown Colorado, Inc. We have here with us today Catherine Carell and Brian Corrigan, and I'm going to pull up some of the results from the community engagement. And if you guys want to come up and walk through it, I think most of you had a chance to attend one of those, and this will be inclusive of both the 2 in-person engagements as well as the online tool that was conducted. Oh, I got the wrong one.
The other number 5.
Try 6. There we go.
Hello, and thank you for having us. It's been really a pleasure to work with your town staff and your community through this process. So thank you very much for including us. I wanted to introduce myself and have Brian introduce himself while being respectful of your time, because I understand you have a retreat to do after this. So don't want to add to that too much. So my background is in public administration and economic development. I've worked in community engagement and activating communities through volunteers and different networks for over 20 years. And I've been with Downtown Colorado, Inc. for over 13 years. We work throughout the state of Colorado. We've done technical assistance and different engagement processes in over 100 communities, large and small, rural and urban. And it's really around thinking about the partnerships between the public and the private sector and how you can engage people and really think about the role of the public sector as creating that environment that is conducive to private sector programming, private sector thriving, all of those different things.
Awesome. I'll keep my intro short. So I call myself a creative placemaking strategist working at the intersection of community planning, creative economy, and technology.
So we've teamed up and we've been working together for 4 years now. We were excited to be here, and our role in this project was really, we have 3 objectives. So conveying your current plans to the community. So really thinking about the layouts, the image boards that you received in your concept plan that you got just before the holidays in December, using your existing tools, so the platforms provided by the city, the communications provided by the city, and putting together a way where we can share the plans that you've developed, that we can engage your citizens in a digital and in-person engagement, and then putting together what those preferences were for you all to review. So the way that we did that was developing essentially a tour, and we tried to do a tour for both pieces of whether it be the digital or the open house. We tried to recreate both of the experiences so that if people were unable to come in person, they would sort of have the same experience. So thinking about how you could do a tour, we did an actual tour of the building, and then we used the architect's drawings and mood boards to put together the online tour. Thinking about image preferences, so people could choose the images that they like the best, and then provide some narrative as to what are the descriptors that really spoke to them about the different pictures, including an interview with the architect. We couldn't do that on the online version, but we were able to do that in person, and then having a little bit deeper discussion where people could really think about how they would use it, what are the different pieces that were a priority to them. So we put together a timeline for this process. We put together the language to go out in all of the online communications, as well as the survey, the full language for the survey, all of the tools that we would be putting together for the in-person meeting. And we shared that all with your staff. We got review. We shared it with the architects and got their, so that they could review it, and then we put it all together. I am proud to say that, understanding your tight timelines, we were originally going to do this over 2 months. We ended up having just about 2 weeks, and we were able to pull it together and get our responses to you in a timely fashion. And our findings were very interesting, and I think that they were very compatible with a lot of what we heard before going into it, looking at previous reports and kind of listening to your dialogue as you were reviewing the concept plans. So the majority of our respondents were between the ages of 26 and 65. It was 92%. So there wasn't a whole lot of engagement from the under 18 crowd or the over 65 crowd. The diversity of respondents who came to the open house was much broader, in that at the open house we had 21% who were under 18. So I think it was better, but still you had that one area that really comprised the majority of respondents, both online and digitally, in person. The types of users were primarily consumers. So we only had 16% who said that they were both consumers and contributors. Contributors being people who might be makers or, starting a business, really working in addition to just using the space for enjoyment. And then, so that really contributed to the ideas around the hours of operation. Most of the responses said that they would like to use it after work hours or after school hours. And when we added in kind of that in-person discussion and a lot of the engagement that we heard from people, we had this tool that we brought here. This is a little mini version of these spinner tables that we had for the event. So there's different words around here like equity or utopia or policy or ethics. And so we had many, many conversations with many, many people at these different tables, and we kind of tuned into the different ones. And a lot of the conversations that I heard were really thinking about how to separate the space, how to use it for different users, and kind of having like hard lines where one user group stops and another starts, specifically around youth. So I think that there might be some concerns that it could be, loud, or it could be more, I guess, youth focused, more harder to just have adult time with your friends. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, because I would have thought there would have been more, focus on youth and playtime. But most of the responses did not really go that way. So that was kind of a surprise. I think that people don't want to have that. I think that they just thought that that would take place during the workday. So then there would be a switch in the evenings. But the majority of our results were really confirming a lot of what you have found, which is that people really do want social community space. They were much more inclined towards adjectives that describe open spaces rather than private or small. And they were really about identity building for your community. So having something that's very unique and specific for the town of Superior, that people can come from all over, but is really focused on local needs. So that was our primary finding. The other thing is that people really did want a lot of feedback about the process. There were, people who were on both sides about how we got to this place, but they were talking about what is the timeline? When are the next decision points? How will we be informed? Can we participate in shaping the policy and the program further? So I do think that as you build out and you get the actual physical space in place, there's a lot of room for continued engagement with your community, to think about the programming and to have self-programming where maybe they can come and create some of those things that they'd like to see.
Yeah, that's good.
So that is our primary findings.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Questions from the board?
There was a couple things that struck out to me, and one was around the layout preferences, being completely the opposite between online versus in person. And then later on in the packet, you say that, the in-person impressions are probably the most valuable. And, the interesting thing is when it came to the layout, I think most of the board liked option 1. I was a minority, I liked option 2. So the fact that there was such a disconnect, online versus in person, and then your statement near the end that the in-person may actually be more valuable. I mean, can you elaborate on that in terms of why there's such a stark contrast?
I think that the images provided may not have come across as well online without the architect's explanation. So there were a lot of comments that they were not clear on what the layouts were saying. People online, there were some comments that there was a road going through the middle of option 2, and how would pedestrians feel? So, I mean, I feel that the actual having the benefit of the interview with the architect in person really impacted those results, and people got a much better feel for what those drawings actually meant. We just used what was given. So we used the layouts from the architects, and I think that portion of it did need a little bit more explanation from the architects and to field those questions in person. But another important part about the layouts is our understanding is that we are not choosing one layout or another, but that we're pulling out the different aspects that we like from each. So when we interpreted it, we really took the positives from both. And so a lot of what we're looking at is actually the positives from both layout 1 and layout 2.
So this one, it really isn't a question, but more just something I wanted to raise to the board as a result of the engagement. One thing we were talking about in the Sunday session, I believe it was around food, which is something I think early on I was all about, yeah, we've got to have some sort of restaurant, bar, food options. But one of the things that came up as a big part of our conversation was around, cannibalizing business from the area. At the same time, we had people saying, well, I want to be able to get Starbucks and bring it in. So I'd like to propose that we discuss that maybe at a later date and kind of how we'd like to handle the food and beverage options, because it was certainly a hot topic. It came up in this report quite a bit, but I think there's a lot of different ways we could go with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good, insightful comment. I think now that we have some of this feedback, there may need to be some directional intent that we have, right? So for example, directional intent for, when you hear about, shared space and evening hours, it lends itself to adult beverages. There are barriers to adult beverages given the location. There's barriers, and I talked to Kendra about this today, so keep me honest, but those barriers can be overcome with a very small code change. I don't want to suggest it's a small change, but a small code change in terms of the narrative that would need to occur. And I think we haven't noticed that. I think we need to bring that proposed code change to discussion at the board sooner rather than later to set that direction. Similarly, around food, if we're going to decide that there is a commercial kitchen and we were going to allow people to sell food that is, we even give people the impression that it might be, quote, subsidized, is that cannibalized? Coffee, when I think about a coffee shop, I don't think there's any amount of cannibalization that can occur from coffee shop A to coffee shop B. I think people, in my experience, there's an infinite amount of coffee that can be consumed. So, but that's just that's my own personal experience. So I'm not.
Well, and I guess more what came up is even kids saying, I want to be able to go to Starbucks, bring my Starbucks in here. But if we are putting a coffee shop in the community center, they're not going to want you to bring in coffee from outside.
I'm not sure. So I think the current shared economy, I'm not sure by they may be us, and it may be, if that's the biggest barrier, I think we'll resolve it.
Yeah.
But I think it's great, insightful, and I'd love to see us sort of set some direction based on this. I do have a couple of questions, though. So I thought it was great. I attended I think it was the Thursday night session. I was out of town for the Sunday session. I thought the Thursday night session was great. Really enjoyed it. I thought the survey I recognized it was put together pretty quick. The survey, if I was doing a survey on the survey, I would not have scored it very high. If I was doing a survey on the session, I would have scored it very, very high. The survey it felt like you sort of jumped in, and to your point around those two different visuals, they were very small. You couldn't blow them up. It felt like it was out of context. When we got the visuals on the PowerPoint or on the presentation from Oz, there was a narrative that ended with the visuals. On the survey, you started the survey with the visuals. The whole thing felt inverted. And that was probably our fault for pushing a process too long. So too abbreviated. But I'm very glad that the in-person engagement occurred. My question. What I hear anecdotally, and not based on the data, anecdotally, is the concept of co-working space and daytime type use. And I may be hearing that either because I'm hearing what I want to hear, which I do all the time. I think we all do, but I'm guilty. I'm more guilty than most, I think. Or that's just the circle that I'm in, because when I'm not traveling, I'm working from home, and I spend a lot of time in WeWork type facilities or coffee shops where I enjoy that shared workspace. That didn't come out in your presentation. Can you just address that? And was that definitive? And just put a talk track over that for me.
I would say it wasn't in the top tier of choices. It wasn't in the top tier of priorities. It definitely was included in the comments, and there were some comments that were like, we don't want working. But those were very minimal. Most of them I thought were supportive of
We don't want
co-working.
working, I'm sorry to interrupt, we don't want Joe's law firm to set up shop there? I agree. Well, no, I don't want to say I agree or disagree. Do you mean we don't want it to be commercial space, commercial private space, like a law firm or a bank, or you don't want co-working?
There were comments that it's irritating when people are working at Starbucks. But there were very few of those. There were comments that people would like to have a place where they could get out of their home office in a more public setting. Right. There just weren't as many as the other comments. Okay. So the majority of the comments were around comfortable, loungy space for fun and entertainment. There was definitely interest from some people in co-working. And I think the beauty of how it really panned out is most of those people who are looking for fun, cushy, comfortable entertainment type things are all looking for doing that after work hours. So I don't think that this in any way is incompatible with co-working. And it really encourages the idea of transformer spaces where you can have one thing and then it can transition very easily to another.
Okay, that's helpful. My next comment or question or observation or whatever, I feel like we have 4 different threads going on right now around 1500 Colton. We have the good work that you're doing, and I wasn't familiar with your work before meeting you in person a couple weeks ago. But I went on your website and see you guys are it's cool. I like it. Your job's much more fun than my job, my day job. This is a joy. There's the work that Better City is doing around just some of our more commercial business development thing. I don't know if you saw Adam's report from earlier. There's the work that Happy City is doing around sort of what this community needs from an identity perspective, from an art and cultural brand perspective. And then arguably there's 5, because there's the architect who has his own vision and has other customers and clients. And then there's this board who hopefully we have a vision that we probably have 7 different, but hopefully we'll come up with a singular vision. I mean, clearly it's Matt and his team that are synergizing this, but I think it's you guys, and I don't know what the status of your engagement in, but I see you as the, collective we in this, because there are so many different threads, and I get nervous when I hear that, Adam doesn't get the report from Happy City. And I get nervous that Happy City didn't even know that we were doing this thing with 1500 Colton. And we're early in the process, but this is going to be hopefully a pretty quick thing. We want to be enjoying coffee, beer, library books, whatever we're enjoying in that space by the fall. And so, I think you're going to be back regularly. I just want to make sure that we're connecting those dots, because there are those 4 or 5 different threads, and I worry that they're not as connected as they should be. So, and I don't have an answer for that, but.
Well, so because DCI, we're a membership organization, and we've been around for, almost 40 years working in the state of Colorado. We do help communities at all stages. So, many times communities have reports from various folks, and they want to figure out, how are these all going to be synchronized? How do we get all of these pieces moving together? And that's definitely a role that we play. So we'd be happy to continue working with you.
So, again, thank you for what you've come in and done. I was unable to attend either of the sessions. I had a planned medical procedure recovery that prevented that, but I heard great feedback not only from this board, but from others who attended. I do have one question related to the statement in the report and tonight, related to less desire for child amenities and playthings. And I can't remember because I took the survey almost immediately when it came out, Were there questions about trying to identify if the respondents had kids, and do we know what type of percentage of the respondents actually had elementary, middle, pre, whatever kids? Anything that would give us that type of indication?
We did not.
Okay. I mean, my only concern, because I also was trying to push anybody and everybody I know to go out and take the survey and get out to these sessions so we get as much feedback as possible. And because I'm in that demographic right now, I have young children, that's the people I'm around at this moment. Almost nobody I talk to is able to actually do it because they're busy. They're chasing their kids all the time. So it just didn't rise to their priorities. So while that didn't come through here, I am still concerned that that might be something that we're missing, because those are also the same folks that are looking for something to go do with their kids on a Saturday afternoon, whatever. I think they would be users of this facility. So while we might have heard that here, I want to make sure that we don't discount it 100% during the decision-making process. I'd also like to have a conversation about timeline, but we can finish questions and whatnot before going into that.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Do you want to talk about timeline? I had a few general comments as well, but I'll go with my general comments, because part of the reason for my comments tonight is because I'm not going to be here at the next meeting, and I do appreciate the staff's going to keep things moving along, and we're going to have some design options at our March 10th meeting, and this process is moving forward, which I think is great. I was fortunate enough to go to both events and took the online survey, and I appreciate all the effort that went into that, and I think I was very impressed with the attendance on both nights. So I thought it was great, and the general vibe I got from people there and people I've talked to both there and elsewhere is there's great excitement at the potential for this facility. And I mean, that just, it seems universal, and I think that's great. I had my own personal hesitations, but I mean, as I really hear the excitement of the community for what could be done there, I think the board made the right decision to acquire it. To me, this really feels like it's the future headquarters and base of operation for event space of all types, and not only town events and chamber events, but resident events, weddings and gatherings. This is the giant living room that people wish they had, but you can now have it in town, where so many things get taken out of town. Superior residents are a very social bunch and want to, I think they'd like to stay closer to home and share home with their friends and people from other communities. So I think that is really what it's, I think that's the real strength of the place. In terms of bar or a venue that serves alcohol full-time, I am personally opposed to that. What bar feels like to me is, I envision something like the Gatehouse or the Dove House, which we've all probably been to 24 times, in Lafayette, where the event space, they have a bar structure built there, and if you go to an event that is an evening event, they're most likely serving alcohol. I'm totally okay with that, and I think that is the appropriate use of that facility to provide alcohol. I think that would also be done on a special use permit versus a full-time license, and that's something I've asked our attorney to look into, because that may actually work better for us than this trying to change the liquor code, which is another topic. So that's my personal view of how bar piece would fit into this facility. In terms of food, I think a facility that could be a prep kitchen for events, a facility for test kitchens, all that's great. I love the imagery, and I think all that would fit well. But full-time food service, I think it would cannibalize our are nearby restaurants, and I'm not interested in going there. I'm not interested, I think whatever we would do to provide a venue for an operator would be subsidizing them, and that thus puts others at a disadvantage. Coffee shop, I think, is a little bit different. I think it'd be fine to have a coffee shop there, but one idea might be to have Starbucks be the provider of said coffee that is served in the coffee shop inside. I mean, that's all the time. I mean, you've got Starbucks next to each other, and and Starbucks provides to hotels. I mean, people love Starbucks. So that's an idea for how to kind of make it a win-win for a business that could potentially have a little bit of cut in business if you open up some coffee venue next door, but maybe we just buy all the coffee and resell it. So those are my thoughts on the event, but great work, and excited to see things moving forward.
To follow up on that a little bit, Clint, one of the ideas that I was talking about with some residents at the engagement was, even rather than necessarily providing food and drink in the facility, offering up a menu of menus to local Superior restaurants, where we're saying, hey, these are restaurants that are nearby and they deliver. So PJ's will run some burritos over, things like that, because that would really help us to push Superior businesses, but also allow people to bring in whatever they would like. I heard from a lot of residents, we want to be able to bring a sandwich from home and eat it here,
right,
which I just don't think is appropriate if we're going to be selling food and drinks there.
No, here's the local vendors that can, package A, B, C. No, I think that's great. It's a great idea. Others? Ken, you want to talk about time frame?
Yes, I just want to touch on the time frame that's in the staff memo. I appreciate Kevin's statement earlier that potentially we've already abbreviated things a bit further than they should have. Looking at this time frame, I still think we're doing that. I mean, right now, decision on uses and approval of final design proposed for February 10th. That's the next meeting. We haven't seen it. We're gonna have 2 people missing. Heaven knows we could talk about it for 4 or 5 hours and still not get anything resolved. And if there's disagreement amongst the board or even agreement amongst the board that we're not happy or want to see a little bit of change in what's designed, it pushes it back. I'd much rather see a more realistic time frame put out, and not only for the quality purposes, but once you tell the community, expect this in the fall of 2020 or the end of the year 2020, that's an expectation that they're going to hold us to, because they want to use this space, as do all of us. I'd much rather under-promise and deliver in this scenario rather than over-promise and under-deliver. I think that's the strategy we need to move forward with, and if we can do it shorter, great, but let's not push ourselves into putting out an inferior product just because we wanted something quickly.
I actually had a question I forgot to ask. When you were doing, unfortunately, I got there very late on the Thursday night session, and I didn't have a coat, and I was freezing to death when I was out in looking at the various boards. But during the process, was there any sort of discussion from the participants on any of the things that we showed them that they were or weren't interested in? So, for example, we've made some assumptions on library space and teaching kitchens and things like that. Did you get any sort of sense from the participants on any of the things that were of less interest to them?
The things that people actually rated as the least of interest were the kitchen and makerspace. But I do feel like the phrase makerspace was unfamiliar with people. So when we would have talks, we would sort of describe what that might entail. They had a whole different reaction than when they were just kind of encountering that as a concept. But those were actually the 2 lowest working.
Okay, great. Priorities. Thank you.
Okay. Others? All right. I think we may have wrapped it up. So thank you very much for coming in. sticking around and giving us that update. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. All right, anything else before we move on to reports? And wrap up our regular meeting, and then go change and get ready for the retreat? Okay. All right, reports. Who'd like to start?
In the interest of us getting to our retreat, I have no report.
This is a great thing about reports at the end.
Yeah, I'll go and say I also have nothing to report, although I say that's my least favorite part of the change, and I think needs to be addressed in the report. Of all the reports that I gave, I thought, Mark, the one you gave, for example, last April or May around the conversation you had with Verizon. It's a great example of something that needs to happen. If we do reports at the end of a meeting, it's just people get tired or they forget. So I think we got to talk about it at a retreat, but in the interest of time, I have no reports, but I miss them. I miss hearing everybody else's.
Okay, others?
I'll just say that I published the survey out to residents saying, how am I doing? Got feedback. Happy to discuss it with any of you, but have some changes I'll be making.
I have no report. Break the stream here. So I attended the ProStack meeting on January 15th, and I think moving the work plans to a dedicated, sort of presentation session will address a lot of the ProStack concerns. They're really kind of worried about, the interaction with the board, and they were kind of, I think the absence of a defined dinner really sort of set them on edge. And then one of the other things that we confirmed with staff is they wanted to ensure that Oz had received everything that ProStack had put together over the last 5 years with respect to surveys and, space planning, all this stuff that ProStack has compiled. Oz got all of that really early on. So they've had that all. So that put us all kind of, at ease a bit. And the other thing is on January 22nd, I attended the Chamber after-hours event at 1500 Colton Road. I think holding the event at the 1500 Colton Road was a slam dunk, and I appreciate staff stepping in when the Chamber's spot fell through. It was pretty obvious that a lot of folks that live in Superior and have businesses had not actually been inside the building yet, so it provided a lot of opportunity for them to kind of weigh in on the survey. And they are a lot of the folks I talked to are really excited about the potential going forward. That's all I got.
Thanks, Neil. Sandy? Okay. My only report on the 6th of January, I met with Representative Neguse and a couple of the other mayors from the Boulder County area, and a good portion of that discussion, this was at his office in Boulder, and a good portion of that discussion was about airport noise. And one of his asks of us as mayors was to help identify other airports and communities that were having similar issues around the country, in hopes that he and his staff could have further discussions with those representatives and potentially build some momentum for his bill that he's introduced. He was frank and said it's probably not going to pass, but it at least advances the discussion, and his hope was to at least get a committee hearing, and thought that would significantly elevate the discussion. And so I passed that request along to the town manager, and we did get some information from the airport consultants and got that over to Representative Neguse's office. I got that to them over the weekend, and they were responded that they were appreciative of that effort. So thanks for staff for helping out with that. And that is all I've got. All right, anything, Matt?
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, Dan?
Report either.
Thank you, Phyllis. All right, with that, we are done with reports, questions, and issues, and we are ready to adjourn the regular meeting, and we'll be back same place here in a few minutes for our retreat.
You want us to set the tables?
Yes, please.
Tables, yes, that'd be great. Okay, we are adjourned.
So did you